people who do not follow this, to add another factor in the imaginary bank of fears. Do not take it seriously unless you start seeing massive amounts of Russian troops enter the country. And we have seen no indication of that. Back to you, Axel.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I think it's important that we also address these questions when they come up. Whilst we've done this here many times, Popsicle, feel free to ask any question which you may have in future. We'll be very glad to attend to this. Fella who bonks.
Yeah, and Popsicle, this is an Axel or Ari, you may have the actual number, but I'm just going to make one up that's pretty close to probably where it is. I think this is the 6th or 7th time the Belarusians have done this throughout the course of the war. I've kind of lost count. Nobody really cares. They're, as you know, you two gentlemen did a good job pointing out, the Belarusian military is quite small, very poorly trained, under-mechanized. So if they actually want to open the FAFO box, what they'll find out is that their forces will be exterminated with great prejudice by cluster munitions over the space of a few hours. And a few hours shortly thereafter that, the potato will get peeled. So now they've done this half a dozen times or so already. I'm sure I'll do it a couple more times. This is just an attempt to stay relevant and stay in the news. That's all. And it works with some people that don't pay it very close attention, but just disregard it.
All righty, and with that we go to Cornelius.
Sorry about that. I had to run across the garage. Question about Putin's recent whirlwind tour through a number of sub-states. I believe he visited his gold machine gun wielding partners in Chechnya and Azerbaijan, and I could have got that name wrong. He may have visited other places as well. My take on this is
I love it when you say the whirlwind tour of. Would you mind adding the Putins, because we were not quite sure how many of them were whirling there in the wind?
Good point. Yeah, exactly. Somebody's going to take a bullet, and he doesn't want it to be him. Now he's gone around. I think that's a recruiting tour. He needs quick forces fairly quickly. Has anybody heard of how productive that tour was?
Unless you start reviewing, shall we say, Russian sources, which constantly highlight that nothing has ever been more sensible than what Putin does, X, Y, Z. You will probably, sorry, in the background there's a poodle who's claiming food. I apologize. Charlie Lassis. Shut up. Sorry. Not you, Cornelius, of course. I apologize. There's a poodle which has been fed, but it's still claiming that he's been terribly, terribly mistreated by not getting another bone or something. Anyway, no, but I think it's pretty damn clear that there is very little outcome other than maybe the discussion which he had previously in Azerbaijan, which was expected to occur because given the fact that the United States has reached out to Armenia to ameliorate after the conflict, Azerbaijan will want to make sure that it's considered to be, the more important counterpart to work with, and the current White House as well as the State Department have had real issues in dealing with Azerbaijan. But then again, that is a personality issue vested in, say, a few undersecretaries and a deputy secretary of state, which can't be helped. Previously, during the last, both the Trump administration and finally even the last 2 years of the Obama administration, Azerbaijan actually played a significantly bigger role in, say, what U.S. administrations were doing. The Biden administration hasn't followed that path. And since Pelosi landed in Armenia, things have started becoming a bit more difficult. And that you can see. So in addressing your question, of his recent trips, Baku, respectively, the meetings with the Azeri leadership certainly have been more important. This also goes hand in hand with, of course, the use and the abuse of the airspace, where Russian pilots have unfortunately intruded upon Azeri airspace and over the Caspian Sea for quite some time. So there's a couple of things which really have been intruding upon Azeri airspace, for quite some time, and that shouldn't occur. And they had to make up for that. And at the same time, of course, there's a number of, say, transit interests in terms of money there. What is most interesting is that the meetings in the stands didn't really bring anything, and we are still fast on track to having a proper, sensible Western airbase in Kazakhstan, and he can't do anything about it. So I would turn it around this way. He's not really achieving what he would like to achieve, albeit that at least one candidate in the whole region who matters to us, or which matters to us, Azerbaijan, unfortunately has completely different interests, which are very regional and will require balancing.
Very well.
It's not
I was going to say, good answer.
But still.
No, that's all right. I mean, I get the idea. There's really no news yet as to whether he's been able to marshal troops to respond to Kursk or backfill his assault. Anyway, that's really where I was going, and I appreciate the extra help. Thank you.
Yeah, he did not manage to get anyone from the steppes to join in and get their scimitars out and jump on horses to invade certain parts of occupied Ukraine, which the Russians evidently have difficulties holding in future.
So
I wonder how embarrassed. Oh, sorry. I was going to say, I wonder how embarrassing he would find all that optics, where you've got the Chechen warlord's fat son double fisting machine guns that are gold plated. I wonder if the Russian mind think that's really cool, eh? Or if they think, yeah, you've got bigger fish to fry than this kind of stuff.
Well, he uses and abuses, obviously, the Kadyrovцы, and who, in turn, by having, so to say, their suzerain give them power, he uses the Kadyrov and their thuggish abuse and their power plays in the region to ensure that others in Dagestan and the likes don't revolt. So it's a power tool, quite literally, for the region, and that's very unfortunate. I mean, yeah, you have a very nice estate there, Mr. Kadyrov. Painful if you were to burn in it.
So just really quickly to add to those 2 points, which were very well said. As far as the Kadyrov antics, right, that's for the local population. That's not for the Russians. It seems to go over well there. Whereas in Russia, there are a significant amount of people that laugh at stuff like that, right? As far as the Azerbaijan trip, that was understood to be happening a long time ago. That things like that have happened before. It's an economic interest for both countries. As Axel well said, Azerbaijan's focus is regional, not international. And they will play in the same way as India, both sides, for their best outcome, especially as Armenia has pivoted westward. So I think that's important to remember. And then the one final thing, the only thing of importance that I took away from the hour or two of various clips from Putin's visits, both to Chechnya and Azerbaijan, was there is one film, one second, it's like a 2-second part of a 10, 15-minute clip. And Kadyrov says to Putin or the Putin clone, because we don't know if it's actually Putin or one of his lookalikes, that we're foot soldiers in this. And Putin says to him, we're both foot soldiers in this, meaning we're both in the trench. If I fail, you fail, and you're dead. You better support me. And my takeaway from that and all the other videos is it was a meeting just to, it was Putin going down there to show, look, I'm supporting you, I'm with you, but you better prop me up, otherwise you're going to fall also, buddy. And, that's a very real message.
He's probably looking for an escape valve. If things go really south, he's going to have to disappear to somewhere, or else he will be throttled.
I don't think he's going to run. I don't see him as being the type of person who would go to some island in the middle of nowhere, right? Or a home in the middle of the Amazon. I don't see, right? He will stay until it is literally his neck on a block. And I do believe that theoretically it came to that point, right? He might do something drastic like nukes. But short of that, I don't see anything like that happening, right? But he's not running.
The protocol in Russia for that is still very complicated, and we shouldn't even go there because I don't think that Mr. Putin is such an irrational person. He's evil, yes, but he's extremely rational, and I think that he does understand where the limits are.
Agreed, and that's why I said only if it was a matter of him, being in a building with hundreds and thousands of troops approaching and no chance of him surviving. Right, that would be the nuclear option if he thinks he's about to die. I think he would sooner do that than flee to another country. That being said, I don't think he would do that. Right. I was just simply trying to make the point that I don't see him under any circumstances stepping down and going into exile or hiding somewhere else. Back to you, Axel.
Yeah, I'm trying to deal with the wind noise here in the background. I apologize, fella.
Yeah, Cornelius, I think, and I believe Ari agrees, and I'm about 100% sure Axel agrees. The way Putin leaves power is room temperature and feet first. He's not gonna flee. He will be killed. He's not. You got to think about it from his perspective. There's no place on this planet he would be safe. From the Ukrainians or from my favorite agencies with 3 letters that would seek to unalive him wherever the hell he went, whether or not we have treaties with them. So he even someplace like Azerbaijan, that's not safe for him.
Alrighty, Tom, welcome back.
Hello, Axel. It's been a long time. Just wondering, have you guys covered a little bit about Pavel Durov or had any discussion about that today?
I was not online with a with a nightly excursion together with our friend Chuck last night, but throughout the weekend I have no idea whether anybody covered it. But I am very, very happy that currently someone at the DGSE is debriefing Mr. Durov. I like that. I think that's the work French intelligence together with others, NATO intelligence is doing, and almost likely having shared this with the Five Eyes, will be greatly helpful to us.
Right.
And that's wonderful.
Right. Well, that's my theory as well, and I certainly agree that I think that is going on. We are, in the information space. It's kind of the biggest news out there, but it's a narrative that I think people should be aware of. There's almost certainly going to be a lot more than meets the eye here, right? And this is not a case of
True
free speech crackdown by the hypocritical West, which is what MAGA and the Twitter sphere are all abuzz about today. And
really, is anyone saying this? Who is so cretinous to say that? I mean, do they not understand how this works? Telegram was founded by Mr. Durov, built by Mr. Durov. At some point in time, the back doors created at the very beginning the then GRU asked for direct access. They supposedly, as they once claimed, don't forget they tried for an IPO, and they claimed that they had managed to ensure that the core of their operations and their source code were protected. Sure, of course, you're Russian. Thank you very much. You can lie to me as long as you like, but you're not going to get my money. Thank you. That IPO was cancelled because they simply couldn't hold up for truth, and nobody would invest into them.
Yeah.
There you go. Of course, this thing is open, and the Russians have direct access to everything which is on Telegram if they want to. They went as far as to triangulating access to people, not just in Russia, but also in occupied territories when they had used Telegram, so that they could take them into their crosshairs. And they've taken people into prison. They knew exactly where they were. They have good access to do direct profiling through Telegram, if and when used, and if and when it's on your system. So there you go. That's what it is. And it's like having TikTok on your system. That's equally stupid. But don't tell this to any one of your children, of course, in the United States, because they're all completely, utterly already bamboozled by it. But you need, this is what good parenting is, tough love. You have to tell them when they're in danger. And if they don't see it, because they rarely ever see the danger, then you have to make sure you remove the danger or their access to it. It's very strange, I know. This paternalistic, conservative, old school bullshit, which I constantly project here. I know you all hate it, but I can't help it. It's true.
So regarding the situation, unfortunately, what X perceives today, because of what's going around, is oppressive new European laws around I think it's the latest Digital Markets Act, isn't it? Or sorry, not the markets one, but the new law on large platforms. The press
which is not a new law,
alludes,
which is actually not a new law at all.
When does it date to?
The whole legal setup is already everything which has to do with digital marketing in Europe is already quite old, and under these acts, the commissioners is acting, and it's fairly well known since years. The whole movement and the additional regulations are fairly well known. Every single piece of the regulation which comes out, there's updates, there's additional requests and requirements. Yes, they come out in bits and bobs, but there you go. But the whole concept is well known.
So
and
what I'm trying to get,
Mr. Musk, yeah, sorry.
No, what I'm trying to get to is that there's an official line around why he was arrested. I'm suggesting, strongly agreeing with you that is not. That's like the tip of the iceberg here in terms of the whole story. But that official narrative, which is refusing to moderate the platform and take down certain content, is the reason he was arrested, and therefore it's hypocrisy by the Western platform crackdown on free speech. Elon's having a fit right now, as are all of his acolytes and the rest of X and Twitter. And so
he should be so happy that the United States government has given SpaceX the job to take those 2 astronauts home, and should shut up.
Yeah,
that's what he should do. He's just a human being, and if need be, let's make this very clear. Mr. Musk, who runs this platform, is neither above the law nor is he invulnerable. Let me say this again. He is neither above the law nor is he invulnerable.
Absolutely.
Maybe I should say this a third time. He is neither above the law nor is he invulnerable. If you make significant enemies amongst your own at some point in time, that's the end of your story.
He has.
Can I ask you a question quick? I want to get your take on this. With the arrest of Durov, he published his travel plans to France in advance. He landed in France knowing that he had a warrant out for him.
Right.
I'm just going to disclaimer this. This is a thought that was put in my head via my inbox, but the more I think about it, the more I think this is right. This sounds like a defection.
Yes.
This doesn't sound like anything else. And that would explain the amount of freak out that we're seeing too.
I'm not sure. With you 100%. I'm not sure that people are informed enough, hence the.
Tom, you're breaking up for me. I'm hearing one of every 3 or 4 words for you, and it's not just me from the
Why
thumbs
is
up.
the EU cracking
Same problem.
this?
Tom, can you hear? If you can
Yeah.
hear me, you're breaking up. You might want to try getting a
Oh,
slightly
really?
better connection.
No, Arya, if you wait a second, give him a second. He'll recover. We'll have it before. Tom, carry on.
How's this? What? I agree with you entirely. That's it. It probably is a defection. I think it's safe to say it's highly probable theory. I'm going to send you a couple of links. So there's one just background on, Telegram has been perfectly able and willing to work with governments. They just cooperate with authoritarian governments. He just doesn't like working with Western governments, or he said so in the past. So that's one thing. And so I've got a pretty good article someone did some time ago with a full analysis on it.
And he's been, but the funny part, Tom, let me just add something to it. The man just didn't feel comfortable amongst all his Russians in Dubai anymore. That's the whole point. And if he doesn't feel secure there anymore, that can only mean that at some point in time,
right,
either our Israeli friends would have had enough of him, which is
right,
not unlikely, and we know that nobody can prevent the Mossad from touching anyone in the GCC. If that's not the case, he felt, shall we say, more at liberty to go to France than back to Russia or to America for that matter. And there are reasons for it, and that's good. So let's see how it goes.
Yes.
He's just mistaken that when he goes to France, he thinks that he won't be debriefed by people from America. But then again, he can't be helped. He is just a young, stupid fintech operator. They all believe that they are above the parapet. Sorry, above the law, not above the parapet. I apologize.
No problem. I'm gonna send you another thing here, Axel, if you think it's suitable for posting, do it. But there's reports, I can't confirm this, that he was actually in Baku and he tried to meet with Putin and was denied.
Daddy doesn't want to see me anymore.
Right. So therefore, plan B, right? Which is something's got to happen. And I'm just theorizing here, but it could be related to this Kursk offensive and the massive crackdown that Russia has put in on OPSEC and just discussion of it as if Kursk doesn't exist the last 48 hours, right? And it just seems like there's been a total blackout from the Russian side on what's happening, period. That can't make a guy with Pavel Durov's principles happy. That could be the straw that broke the camel's back. Decided to go and have one final chat with Putin to see if he can sort it out. Couldn't. Therefore, well, he's out because his platform is not going. He can't even keep up the pretense that this is some kind of a free speech open platform anymore.
By the way, it's
after this kind of a crackdown.
Yeah, no, I agree. But the funny part is, I just saw that's very strange. Evidently, I've been out in the woods today and in the garden, so I've not seen anything, followed anything. I apologize. But I just saw that a friend of ours, Anders Osland, actually wrote pretty much what I just said, that he went to France to seek protection because he wasn't safe in Dubai any longer. Yeah, that's it. There you go.
Right.
So we're in agreement.
And then Jason J. Smart said something similar. And also apparently, again, I can't verify, there's Pavel Durov driving in a car, listening to a song with the words, "Oh, no matter how hard you try, you can't stop us now." after, the day after the meeting with Putin didn't happen. And driving kind of furiously in a, I hate to sound this to you, driving furiously down the street, as if he's like literally driving down the European highways to France, something along those lines. Of course, he flew in, but you get the point. It's I don't know if this is accurate, and if the timing as portrayed is accurate. Don't know if it's meaningful, but I think that would be an obvious thing to say. Look, don't believe the official story. The unfortunate thing about how European justice works, actually, you'll know more, but rather than when the DAJ goes out with charges, typically they'll have a full charging doc and maybe even a press conference, right? Kind of full detail of the charges. Here, it's been completely mom, which kind of tells you what's actually going on, which is the debriefing, right? I would think.
French prosecutorial process typically does not require or involve any kind of public interviews and statements. It just doesn't work this way. This is what people need to get used to. This is old school shit we do here in Europe, It's based on paper, and people talk very little. They just follow the process.
Yeah, it leaves a lot of room open for the vacuum to be filled. And I've seen this over and over again. Until just the conspiracy theories. Until yesterday, it was some kind of a, so whether it's the guy who died in Italy, Michael Lynch, conspiracy theories. When you get very little information, when the authorities act, it just leaves this vacuum open, particularly in a situation like this. So I just thought it'd be worthwhile bringing up that, not saying any of these theories should be spread around, because they're really just theories at this point too, but I think it's something to counteract what we may be hearing from others on Extra Friends or Conversation, that can't believe that what's going on in the West, the end of free speech is near, and Elon's next, and we're not going to be able to say anything. It's not even close to the truth.
Oh my God!
Right.
Elon's next. Just imagine, that's the man who nearly crashed a car with Peter Thiel in it because he was too stupid to drive something. So he may just crash a car by himself, or one of his Teslas burns, which they tend to do. Oh gosh, are we allowed to say this? Well, let me put it this way. We're in Europe. We don't have this kind of culture of public escalation of jurisprudence and process. We don't have, if it doesn't fit, you must acquit. We just don't have this shit here, and that's good.
Sure.
Alrighty.
Don't tend to disagree. Good luck. Wish you well. I sent you a couple of those things, and
thank you very much for that, Tom.
Thank you
very much appreciated. Thank you for that. Yeah, who was next? Was it Ian or Cornelius? And Tom, you don't have to run away just because we went through the fact that we fortunately do not know what happens over there. Ian, Cornelius.
Cornelius was.
Yeah, I was last.
Cornelius was next. And thank you, Ian, for the honesty. It really, it is very heartwarming how many people, who come up, who get called on, are like, no, I wasn't next. It was the other guy. It happens 1 in 3 times when there's a mix-up, and it brings back a little bit of my faith in humanity. Back to you, Axel. Sorry.
You have faith in humanity? What's wrong with you?
A smidgen.
Okay, you only get 13 shekel. Cornelius.
Oh, big mistake on Ian's part. I've got one of these 15-minute diatribes coming up. Actually, I'm kidding. I just want to add that the Chinese expression "kill the chicken to frighten the monkey" is applicable here, especially as Tom observed about all the ambiguousness surrounding this guy's apprehension. And I'd love to find out what's going through Elon's mind, or other people who have similar sort of balancing themselves on the edge of the razor blade positions throughout the world. Anyway, thanks for that, Tom. I really appreciate you bringing that.
I can tell you, I can tell you one thing which definitely must go. If he is a rational person, to an extent I do believe that he is, what should be going through Mr. Musk's mind at this point in time, and that is, given the declaration of beneficial ownership of the whole shareholder setup of his bid for Twitter, his waste of money, and now the escape hedge with SpaceX, he's been given a chance. He's been given a new opportunity to do something right with SpaceX. He can now deliberately decide to ruin himself further, and with that, file for one of the biggest bankruptcies in US history, and have things taken away from him, or do the right thing with SpaceX, save the 2 astronauts, and look like a hero. And if he fails to do the right thing, oh, hokey pokey.
That was it for me. I'm out. I must go fix the brakes on my car. Thanks, folks. Bye.
Ghost, did you have your hand up, Ghost?
No, that was a ghost hand.
That was a time later. But I wanted to say Elon has a Jesus complex. It means
A
that
cheese-
they think
a cheese complex.
A Jesus complex, yes, actually. he thinks he has the power to change the world. There are more people who are important who has this complex.
Like me, I've changed the world here.
No. Not particularly anyone in this space, but
I get it. Yeah, there often there's a problem with people who achieve a lot, and evidently he has achieved a lot, and he has made a tremendous amount of money out of the huge amount of money he has been given by his father, and by the huge amount of money he has managed to make together with other people out of the failure of 2 companies in which he then participated and was shoved out of by Peter Thiel. For good measure, that's fine. That's okay. So he has succeeded in that regard, and he's done tremendous work in cajoling people in SpaceX to do the right thing, and that's fantastic, and that's wonderful. I don't mind it. If he were to stop attacking a perfectly good system of running cars and rather projecting his dead heat, completely useless battery say proliferation tactics, I'd be even happier about it, but it doesn't really matter. It's completely irrelevant what I think about it. He has currently influence because he has affluence, and he has a lot of electricity, money at his disposal, and therefore he generates power. And as he generates power, negotiating power with politicians, that is important. Unfortunately for him, he makes huge mistakes, many of them. He has always made these mistakes. A good friend of mine is friends with him, and let's put it this way, it will never change because it's his personality to be that way, and that's fine. Therefore, he will make more of these mistakes, and he will unfortunately also therefore have significant friction with people who have real power, and that's not him. But there you go. Ian, please.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to add to the wild speculation regarding Pavel. I think maybe this kind of situation falls somewhere in the middle where, the French authorities had enough, evidence on him to, bring him in to cooperate in some manner to avoid, really losing his rights to. Enjoy the West. And the only way that he could cooperate in any form would he would have to do it under, quote, duress. Otherwise, he would, be at risk in other large parts of the world. But I don't know that I see it like he's a completely defecting and selling, out wholly. But maybe there's he was. Kind of given enough to have him cooperate a little bit.
I think the only thing which we need to hear from him in public, and at some point in time, we might actually have the French make sure that it's heard in public or seen in public, and therefore goes through a process in that regard. which renders the public knowledgeable about it, is that he confirms that Telegram has backdoors. That's all there is to it. That's the only worthwhile thing in that regard. And gosh, I wish somebody would tell Mr. Musk to shut down Mr. Snowden. But then again, he will never understand it. He will never get it. He will never fail to make a mistake in that regard. Snowden is a Russian asset. Snowden has been a traitor, is a traitor, and Snowden is one of the worst ever converted authoritarian Russian agents there is. Assange is another. And no, it's not a matter of slander and libel here. You can all go fuck yourself if you think that way, because there's no way to do it, because we are here on a free speech platform. And by the way, it's actually, funny enough, there's enough truth to it that Western agencies and Western governments have stated as much. And therefore, thank you very much. We're in the clear. We need to be very clear about these matters, and Mr. Musk needs to find a way to editorialize. But if that were the case, then he would lose his argument for how he portrays the asset to which we currently, with our discussion here, contribute, meaning Twitter, which he now calls X. But there you go, doesn't matter. It's Twitter. It was founded as Twitter. And by the way, funny enough, Twittering is something which people have done from a long, long time. It's a very old English word. Alrighty, let me grab an adult beverage from the fridge whilst the dogs are barking.
Go ahead for it. In the meantime, I'm sorry, give me a second. Rocket alert. I want to make sure nobody. Okay. In any case, I wanted to thank everybody who is here. You are currently listening to the MriyaReport. We are a 24/7 news, opinion, and information space pertaining to the war in Ukraine and other interconnected matters. We have a variety of guests we bring onto the space, ranging from former generals and other special forces and officers from various militaries around the world, experts in various fields from drones to energy have come on, religious leaders, civil leaders from Ukraine, Nobel Peace Prize winners, human rights lawyers, and various other aspects. We have gone 24/7, with the exception of brief moments when the space goes down, since the start of the second invasion of Ukraine. We will be here until this is resolved and over. And we are currently doing a fundraiser, which I do believe is very important, which I would like to talk about a little bit. In any case, we've done a variety of fundraisers, some of which I think are more important, some of which I think are less important, right? As with any, a variety of fundraising you are doing. Some of the ones that have really, been able to show amazing results have been, drones that are used for demining, generators that help, or still, to my knowledge, helping, generate power in Kharkiv. For various hospitals and medical facilities. We were able to get double what we planned thanks to you guys. We've gotten ambulances and other stuff before. And while it is not direct aid in the sense you would think of, what we are currently fundraising for, I think is equally important. And that is, we are currently fundraising for the second of Ben Goldhagen's documentary films on Ukraine, the first being To the Zero Line, which was an extremely powerful documentary, which I'm sure most people here have seen. If you haven't, stop listening to me talking now and go watch it. Right, to manage to get through to a lot of politicians and people who have actual power. And he is currently working on a second film, which we are helping fund. And it is about the individual citizens in Ukraine and outside of Ukraine and what they are doing, right, to win and to survive. And in any case, I don't like documentaries. I really don't. I find them very annoying. They tend to repeat themselves over and over again, or dramatize things, or I just don't like the format. I would rather read even a textbook entry than watch a 30-minute documentary, because I tend to find that I can get the same amount of information in about 5 minutes. But his first film, I thought, was good enough that I've watched it 2.5 or 3.5 times through. I know I've seen it once on my own. I watched it once with several family members, and I watched half of it with some other family members who were older, who I edited out a couple of scenes because I thought it was a little too graphic for them. In any case, it was an extremely powerful film. It really touched me, and I know it touched a lot of people that don't have the knowledge base or follow this in the same way as me. So I think his second film will have a much greater impact even than that, especially now when the news isn't focused on this and there aren't as many documentaries coming out, whereas at the time there were, and the news was focused on it. It also does help people within Ukraine directly, because while he can't pay people to do it, he can, give them food and other things that they need. So my understanding is he helps out all the people that are involved in it to the best of the abilities, which really makes a difference, because most of these guys are unemployed in their fields because of the war, and the fact they are also having to serve in the military, so they have no income coming in for the families, or it's just a very small stipend from the military, right, which does not cover necessities fully. And in any case, I really think this is important. I think it has the possibility of reaching some people with some actual power and sway and making a difference. I would highly recommend to anybody giving, if you give $25 or more, you get your name in the film, in the credits. So, that's something you will be able to look back on and say, I helped with, I did, I made a difference. If you don't want your name, you can put your Twitter handle. You get Twitter bragging rights then, right? Or you can put in, if you want an advertisement for your company, cheapest advertisement you'll ever buy. Or you can do it in honor of a loved one, right? Whether it was a friend or somebody you knew in Ukraine who was killed, or a personal relative who's passed away. I will be giving a donation in my grandparents' honor. If you give, there are higher tiers if you're really interested in getting involved with some of the decision-making process and being a producer and having your name on the producer credits. There are higher tiers for anybody interested. Please feel free to reach out to our main account, and we will send you the info on that. Also, to my understanding,
what you're saying is,
go ahead.
What you're saying is people should do the right thing. Consider what you can change with a small donation. You can change the way this is being portrayed. And if you're here already, then you are supporting our approach to this information war, in which we are a small part against this wave of trolls, in which we are, from time to time, a shining light when we're good, not that we always are, vis-a-vis the darkness that those many, many highly paid, very well organized, massive forces of Russian troll farms, intelligence operations, Iranians working in the space, massive Chinese sponsored and Chinese operated and Chinese owned troll farms are doing. This is a major thing, and one little film can make a significant difference. It's a mitzvah. Don't shy away.
Well said, Axel. That being said, I did not realize it until I came up as a co-host, because I've been dealing with migraines for the last couple of days and then Sabbath. But apparently we have somebody matching up to $10,000 at the moment. And that is huge, right? Because that allows you to double your donation, right? And if you are a religious person, right, then that is double the mitzvah in Hebrew, or good deed, right? I know in Christianity there's a similar concept as far as giving alms and helping the poor people and causes that need it. There's a similar idea in Islam, right? So I do think this is very powerful, and it gives you the ability to double your donation, which essentially you are also now giving double, right? Even though that other person is also doing it, it will not happen without you. My understanding is when people offer to match, right, that's not a guarantee. That's them saying that, I will equal the amount up to that. And in any case, we could do some real good here. And I want to thank everybody who has contributed so far, even if it's just $1 or $2, right? It all adds up. We get none of this. And I'm going to stop because I'm going to start waffling if I continue. And I think I said everything I needed to say and then some. Over to you, Axel. Take it away.
I like it. No, it's good. And the funny thing is, and for every one of you who is not subscribing or not actively pursuing membership or enjoying membership in the Mesopotamian Book Club, not a problem. You can simply donate without having any religious affiliation.
You lost me, Axel. But in any case,
there's the three faiths originating from what is essentially Mesopotamia, which I tend to call the Mesopotamian Book Club, because you quoted all three of them: the Christian alms, the mitzvah, and the what's the
I'm
word the
blanking.
Muslims use?
I'm blanking on the Arabic word, man. I used to know it. I am being disgraceful.
But you know what I mean. So yeah, well, you can do good things without believing in what they believe in. That's what I was trying to tell it. It doesn't matter. The key thing is to get the mission done. So what else is going on today, people? If you have anything to bring us, then we shall be delighted to discuss it. We have another 48 minutes here with Ari and myself, and afterwards I will, after a whole day of doing forest work and heavy duty gardening, tools and the likes, the good things you do on a Sunday when you're not necessarily a full part of the Mesopotamian Book Club. I shall say then good night and good luck, but another 47 minutes you have. Ghost.
Yeah, well, there is a message about the Russians building a pontoon bridge near the destroyed bridge over the Seam River, near Karis in Kurch region. I don't know, but it doesn't seem a good idea to build a pontoon bridge near there, because this could be destroyed in the same way as the bridge was destroyed, because it's in range of Ukrainian artillery.
Yeah, hope dies last. The pontoon bridge dies first.
Yes, but it seems that that they don't learn from the last time that the bridge was destroyed. They built 3 pontoon bridges, and those pontoon bridges were also destroyed because they were in range of Ukrainian artillery. And now they are going to build another pontoon bridge. So, yeah, in my opinion, I don't care. The more pontoon bridges they build there, the more they will be damaged, and the less they have for other actions.
True. But then again, the Looney Tunes will build these tunes until we, make sure that there is no equipment left. And at that point in time, they may finally understand that they are locked in there. And that's the whole target. Albeit, we have to say that thus far in the whole war, Ukraine has not managed to close and completely lock a salient, complete an encirclement, and then move everybody inside there, either into submission, forced by fire, or forced by fire and maneuver. And we haven't seen a mass surrender in what was then the right bank of the Kherson Oblast. We haven't seen this before, even during the Kharkiv offensive. There were two opportunities. There was one close to it in Izium, albeit that some Russian troops escaped. So we will have to see. We will have to wait as to what pans out. We would all, of course, hope that whoever is currently in that salient and on the left bank of the Reka Seim, that they all get either destroyed or decide to surrender, and therefore Ukraine has more prisoners of war to exchange. The latter is, of course, the best possible thing, because there's still many thousand Ukrainian soldiers and civilians who need to be exchanged.
Millions, Axel, right? There's the 700 plus thousand children and women that Russia stole. Leaving out people that are still in the occupied areas, right? There were then another 40 to 60,000 children that were taken from temporarily occupied areas. There are all those that have gone missing that there is not confirmation on either way. We're talking about millions of people, sadly, at this point, from the civilian side, thousands from the military. Back to you.
Alrighty, in the meantime, Polish border guards behave like Polish border guards. Nothing has ever changed. And no, we're not bashing Poland. We are just bashing Polish border guards, which means we're bashing the Polish government, which has been responsible for it for years, be it the previous government or the now new hailed government of Donald Tusk and the likes, because they still haven't managed to unfuck this. Currently, Ukrainians, civilians as well as cargo, but Sergei Soleimani was the kindest to highlight this a little earlier, that in the heat of one of the hotter days in Central, Eastern, and Europe, as well as in Northern Europe, we had our fair share of 30 degrees here today as well in Tallinn. And people at the Polish-Ukrainian border, where he was about to cross at the same, and there were waiting times of 5.5 hours and more, because the Polish border guards, yet again, lazy as these fucks are, useless as these fucks are, stupid and stubborn and bureaucratic as they have remained in recent years, still haven't gotten around to understanding that they need to run a border like a precision machine. But there you go. It seems that the Polish government simply cannot get the service going. It's a very Polish thing. Maybe we need to send them some Frontex people to assist them if they can't get it sorted. The Ukrainians, on the other hand, can sort it quite well. But there you go.
I would agree with you, Axel. I would just, I'm going to refrain from giving personal opinions based on my anecdotal family history of Polish border guards. Not something I want to get into without getting kicked off the co-host seat for the rest forever.
Oh, not a problem. Trust me, you're not the only one who can talk about Polish border guards and their capability of doing the wrong thing at the right time all the time. Alrighty, what else is missing? Okay, so if that's the case, then we'll go back to what people have been discussing a little earlier. I understand that our friends, by the way, it seems that Twitter is sending me wonderful ads as to what I can do if I verify my organization. Beautiful. Do you want to pay a few $1,000 just for MriyaReport to be verified by X in order to achieve nothing?
Definitely not, especially not at a point when I'm co-hosting and they're sending me messages that block me being able to use my screen to join the space as a listener. They really need to start dealing with some of these basic issues.
But the good thing is, if you get billed €11,590 actually annually, say you get it billed once so that you get a $12,000 free ad credit. Oh God. Please, who are you talking to? I mean, this is insane. I know they're running out of money. I get that. I understand this. They need to make their debt payments. Yes, and they can't. It's hard. And oh gosh, what a level of tosh.
It's absurd, right? Because who are the people that this is targeting? NGOs and organizations. So any organization that or charity, right, that has real money is a big charity can easily do it. So they'll get a page, they'll get that promotion, they'll get somebody they can actually message who will give them support. But every small charity is every nonprofit, right, which doesn't have a large piggy bank because not every charity is a nonprofit, right? Many make a lot of money off of it. This really it hurts a lot. That being said, I think there would be much better ways for him to be able to make some money than this, and it really is very surprising that he thinks that that's going to be successful. But who knows, right? He gets 100 organizations and charities to do that. That's real money for him. I don't know. It's just it's very frustrating seeing, and this isn't a problem just with Twitter. This problem with a great many sites. Increasing monetization of things that used to be free, and less features and support, and at the same time, either now non-optional fees that have to be paid, or the free tier is so heavily
Yeah, because the
affected.
advertisement is not there anymore. Because you're right. Things which happen to be free, why were they free? Because evidently, apart from the fact that Twitter, in its former slightly more communist version, in its slightly former more hard left, the very hard left woke version, I mean, it's a pendulum. They were awful beforehand, but they at least had advertisers. And the pendulum swung. We got a bit better tech for Twitter Spaces, I have to say. But everything after they cut out all the legacy crap, which we told them for a long time before. Everyone who's ever worked with Twitter as a counterpart, as I'm told, and many people did before I returned, told me that for years they tried to tell Twitter to get rid of all their legacy shit. And it took a complete shakeup by Mr. Musk for that to actually happen, because they simply couldn't maintain all the manually operated, non-integrated software islands. That's fine, but still, it doesn't help because there is no advertisement anymore, or very little thereof. Thus, the service is not as free for most people anymore. That's the whole point. Now, let me think why the advertisement has died down. A, the advertisers are biased. Yes, sure, they are. And some of them, at least, not all of them. And B, the owner of the company is a bit erratic and has become ever more biased as a consequence, with less liquidity in it and a significant amount of debt leverage on the company for the acquisition. There you go. You have to make it pay. It's nothing new. I could tell you how this would be structured, and that evidently what he's asking us now to pay 12,000 or 11,600 euros. That's evidently going back to fill up the debt service reserve account he has.
I think you're right, Axel. And I used to rail against Twitter before Musk came on. I actually had hoped, right, that he would make it better. I didn't think it could get much worse. It has, and it was better beforehand, right? So they used to shadow ban me regularly, but when I would message them, put, hey, I've been unfairly shadow banned. I've broken no terms of service. Please fix my account at safety and at support at Twitter. They would fix it within a couple of minutes to a couple of hours. A couple of times it took a day or two, but it would always get fixed. And there was a point where they were screwing up, and I got banned like 360 times in one day. They kept fixing it every 2-3 minutes. I would make a new post, and I would get banned again because I was being mass flagged by people in a coordinated effort. They would fix it. They didn't deal well with anti-Semitism and other issues that broke terms of service on certain levels, but they dealt with the other ones. And they did enforce the rules as far as threats of violence and death threats. They no longer do at all, right? Of the last 500 plus accounts I've reported, and I only report accounts for threats of violence and targeted harassment, like saying they're going to rape somebody or something. They've taken action on one account, removing it, and they've temporarily made 3 or 4 remove 1 or 2 posts, while still 99% of their posts breaks terms of service, including calls to violence, and glorifications of terrorism and other things. So since then, they don't fix that anymore at all. Whereas before, it was arbitrary and they would let certain accounts slide, right? Further, they don't fix the shadow banning anymore. I've been shadow banned for over 6 months now. I have sent over 30 messages to Twitter. I have broken 0 terms of service. They will not fix it at all. They refuse to. So this is an issue. And then further, right, because of the way the algorithm is now, if you are not a paid user, they only show your post, even if you have 2, 3, 4,000 followers, to 100 or 200 people. If you are shadow banned, you only get shown to 10 or 20 people. And that's based on who you regularly interact with, or plus whoever then comes to your profile. This is a major issue, right? Further, they are not enforcing threats of violence. They are not enforcing people who are, they are not taking action on people who are sending IP trackers to people. They previously didn't do that either. I know years ago, and this is before Musk, I was sent IP trackers, and I opened them in a virtual box with a VPN going, just to screw with the guy who was doing it. And he started posting the location of the servers, right, and saying he was going to come kill me now. And I copied all of it and sent it to Twitter Safety and Support. They didn't even remove his account. They left it up. They did nothing. So, I don't have much faith, and what faith I had was completely destroyed over the last 6 months. And I understand why certain things are allowed right now, especially, you brought up a very good point. The income revenue is really bad for Twitter. So if you rely on those advertisements to make your money, if you start banning everybody who's actually doing something wrong, you're going to lose 25, 40% of your ad revenue. And Twitter can't afford that. But it's just very frustrating because sadly, this is still the best place for news. This is the only place that has something equivalent to Spaces. And there has yet to be an option that works, that has replaced this one. And until that happens, we're stuck here. So these are my feelings and thoughts. Back to you, Axel.
It's not bad. It's fine. Think about it. Being stuck here, this platform exists, it works, and we can use it. The only alternative to running what we're running here is to have a global digital radio via satellite. And then the problem is you lose the access to the function that people can make comments and connect it via a sensible means of sharing information, discussing information, having a debate. And that's the whole problem, because most digital radio does not provide for that option. So you would need to have that debate platform, and you don't. This is why it is so difficult also for him to get rid of the debate as such, because if you don't have two sides, at least, to an argument, if not preferably 5, you don't really have a debate. And so there is a possibility to make this a very successful means of town hall debate on a global scale in future. At the moment, it does not make any money. At the moment, it therefore doesn't really work. And unless the young man, who's my age, I think, thinks about how to do this rather than how he believes that he should, projecting from his own business success, that he now is wise enough to achieve anything and everything, because it's the classical projection that because you've been good at something, that you'll be good at everything. Unless he finds a way to either be humble or be very successful at this, we do not know. There you go. Fancy.
Yeah, thank you. As you can see, I'm running with a new account because
I can't see anything. I just saw Fancy. I didn't see a new account.
Yeah.
Sorry. Why would I see a new? You require me to check everybody's account. That's insane.
I do so. Yes. But it's not insane. I think
I don't.
I'm quite sane. Anyways.
And but by the way,
he means when co-hosting, Fancy. He means when co-hosting. I'm the person who's not speaking is normally checking, so I took a look. I saw it was you. Brought you up.
Yeah. No worries. Anyways,
I just saw the same. I just saw the same picture, and it said Fancy. So of course it's you.
That's perfect. So yeah, I got deleted yesterday or day before yesterday, night over, for tweeting. Do you think Russia's gonna nuke itself? Pro-Russian accounts flagged it as threats of violence, and I got permanently suspended. So that's that. It's ridiculous.
That is a joke. It's a joke question.
It's a joke question. On the other hand, it's a legit question. You can ask, do you think Putin's gonna shoot himself? Right? It's like a legit thing. It's equally legit to say, do you think Russia, because it's so frustrated and so stupid, it's gonna nuke itself? It's a legit question. It's not a threat, right? And I mean, we hear Russia permanently saying all sorts of nuclear bullshit, right? So why would I not ask something like this? Yeah, but for this I got deleted permanently, and I started a new account. And until then I was always saying, hey, like at least Twitter is a platform where there's relatively free speech, and as long as you don't threaten anyone, you stay online. But it seems I stand corrected. At least we can convene back here under different alter egos, under different accounts, if we get deleted, and continue the discussion. So I think it's still the best platform out there, but yeah, it's quite suboptimal how they handle reporting, because I have gotten also like Arjen, like I've been been reporting people who threatened me for my life, and there was no answer, right? Those accounts were running, or accounts that were calling for let's wipe Ukraine off the map, nuke Ukraine. There's plenty of those accounts out there, and they don't get taken down. So I don't know if it's really like incompetence, and that their algorithm really reacts on mass reporting, and that the Russians have better mass reporting troll farms. That's totally possible. Or if it's a bias within the system. I don't know. Either of those two things, right? Either it's Russians have better, bigger troll farms so they can mass report you faster. And even though we in NAFO are quite organized, we don't have enough people mass reporting. So it can be this, or it can be a bias within the platform. This I don't know, but certainly it's quite inconvenient, especially when you had quite some reach and you get sent back to zero to start again.
So I think it's both. I think both of those factors are true. right? On the one hand, the only effective way at this point for getting accounts looked at is by mass flagging them. If there's only 2 or 3 people that are reporting a post, it will go nowhere. You need dozens. And that gets it, my understanding is that gets it to the top of the list, opposed to it may get looked at in 2 weeks' time by some guy working there. Then there's the matter of bias. Twitter gives, and then my understanding is it has not changed since when it was previous ownership, is Twitter gives an undue amount of control to mods. And once certain actions are taken, right, they cannot necessarily be easily reversed, and there is no proper process to deal with it. So, in regards to what you were saying, right, I agree with you completely. Saying will Russia nuke itself is not a breach of Twitter's terms of service. Now, if you say, do you think Putin, should kill himself? Right, that could be seen and interpreted as something pertaining to instigating suicide, or or bullying, or certain other things by a mod who doesn't like you. So that is a little bit more of an issue. But you're 100% right. There are literally tens of thousands of accounts who have posted within the last 48 hours. Ukraine is Nazis and needs to be destroyed, or the Zionist entity needs to be wiped off the earth from the river to the sea, or anything like that. And there is no action taken on those accounts. But you writing a clearly satirical post which breaks no terms of service is going to get you permanently banned. Yeah, that is the accuracy. So I think it's a mixture of those two things. And then on top of which, I think part of it is also leftover bits of code, right, from earlier versions of Twitter that interact. So certain keywords will still flag stuff and get you shadow banned, even if they're saying they're not doing it, because I don't think they're even fully aware the code is still in effect, right? They don't fully understand the code that is there, and the people they have working on it are playing catch up to the people who wrote it, who didn't even fully understand it. Right, computer code, and I'm sure anybody who has done any coding will to some extent agree with what I'm saying, is a little bit like magic, right? In the sense it's not even fully always understood by people who build programs and stuff, the full capabilities of what they put in there. So, it's a mixture of this, but it's a major problem, right? Because the people that fight back against disinformation, whether it's pertaining to Ukraine, anti-Semitism, genocide denial, 100 different issues across the board, right? We're the ones who get penalized, and the people spewing this crap almost never do. So, you got removed permanently for that one post. I got back my first reply from any account I've reported in about 3 months, right? The other day, I reported the account over 20 times for various violations. Every single one of their posts were either calling for killing Jews, death threats against individual Jews, or targeted harassment with clear posts with visuals that break Twitter's terms of service. Their profile picture was a picture of a terrorist who was a child who committed a suicide bombing in Lebanon in the early 90s. Okay, with a weapon in his hand, which is a direct violation. Their info on their profile was a call to violence, and their username broke terms of service. They removed 5 of their posts saying that they were all threats of violence or various things. They sent me one back which had no information on it. It was a completely blank return report, just saying they had violated something, but no info passed there. And nothing was done to the account. They removed the 5 posts, and they were tweeting again, another 1,000+ posts, right, that are breaking terms of service with actual violence. And, this is one of hundreds of anecdotal examples I can personally give that I have seen with my own eyes. And it's ridiculous, man. I'm sorry it happened to you. Please, I really recommend to anybody on Twitter or any other social media platform, make a list of the user accounts, right, that you really truly do care about, that if you are booted, you will be able to easily re-add them. Otherwise, you will go through hell trying to do it. It is very important because we sign terms of service that allow them to kick us off even if we haven't technically broken anything, right? They are the final arbitrators, and that is what happens when you sign up for a product in a company like this. And we need to be aware that what has happened to Fancy today can happen to all of us, and to be aware. And so that if it does happen, you can react opposed to, just giving up. And thank you, man, for coming back. If you were following him before, please make sure to give him another follow. And I'll give it back to you, Fancy.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about one thing. It's a pain in the ass to go back and find everyone that you have been following, especially many Ukrainians who are deliberately hidden from you, right? So I had a few Ukrainians that I knew and followed, but because it's so many, I cannot remember everyone by name or account handle. I just remember their faces from profile pictures or so, and it's really hard to find them. In the past, what I had done is exactly what you said. I saved steps of my account, and basically made a backup of the IDs that I followed. Unfortunately, that one got burned on a server that crashed, got wiped. So this time I didn't have my backup, but I had it once, right? So this is my third account since the Ukraine full scale invasion. First time I was Fancy Pants Vishniakovsky. Back then I created this backup of accounts that I followed. Then I was running with Fancy Vyshyvanka for a while.
Vyshyvanka.
And here, the only thing that was good, I had 20 sock puppets that partially kind of like followed the same crowd. So I revived one of those sock puppets to make it my main account now. And we'll see. I also filed some objection with Twitter for the suspension. They give you an option. I don't know what the procedure is, if there is something happening in the background. And also the NAFU crowd out there, they have a Discord server where there is people who seemingly know more, have some background with Twitter, who can help one to reinstate the account, to get it reinstated. So I contacted them as well, and we will see. If I get my account back, I'll be super happy. If not, I'll just keep growing back up. And yeah, it's Twitter. It's stupid.
So when are you back in Ukraine?
Wednesday late night. So this week I'm going back now to Ukraine, to Lviv. Then going to be with family for a couple of days, 5 days or so, in the mountains, and then back to Lviv and back to Kiev in about 1.5 weeks.
There is a lot of work to do, and there's a lot of opportunities still in the interaction with Ukrainian business, be it in the IT as well as general production sector. I can only highly recommend to everyone who wants to actually engage with Ukrainians, don't shy away. There's loads of things to do. There's lots of work to do. The country needs more trade. It needs more entrepreneurs. It needs more direct investment into capable environments and capable companies producing for Ukraine to not only sustain its population but also generate those weapons of war. But there you go, Fancy.
Yeah, this is absolutely right. And I want to use this opportunity to recommend to you end of September. I think it's somewhere around 28th. But please check. There is the IT Arena in Lviv, and it's a place where the Ukrainian tech talent before the full-scale invasion always went to meet, to connect with customers and clients abroad and presented their tech startups. I was there last year. It was not only a great showcase of Ukrainian entrepreneurship and defense tech, but it also was a great opportunity and party there to connect with pro-Ukrainian people from abroad. There were lots of Americans and British visiting, some German venture capital firms, and yeah, it was just fantastic to connect. It was spread out across the city, and I believe it will be again. You will have different venues in different places. Will be foods, drinks, entertainment. It will be buzzing, and I can recommend it. It's pretty safe, So Lviv, I would say nothing to fear. A big international crowd, um, and yeah, it was pretty amazing. That's that. And to Ukrainian companies, yeah, I agree with you. There is really lots of opportunities in Ukraine, and especially along the lines of that there is Ukrainian tech companies, also defense tech companies that want to scale up, and besides helping Ukrainian army, want to get ready for business and making money. And they need partnerships in Europe or in the US, and I think a lot of them have already also US offices. First, to build production lines outside Ukraine, because in Ukraine, currently, much of the talent is really tied up in fighting the war. So if you have production lines in Europe or human resources, there's an opportunity to help a Ukrainian business to scale and to participate in the success. And also, like, there's, I think, lots of venture financing opportunities as well, and opportunities for partnerships, of course, as well.
And that's the key thing. Lots and lots of people who are currently listening to us who have an interest in that regard. If you wish to engage with the Ukrainian tech sector, they are still working. There's many of them who've actually served in the army, who've returned. There's many veterans, many people who've lost a number of limbs and are now working in order to support not only their families, but also from time to time, the defense sector in Ukraine. That's a good thing to do. There's lots of programming ongoing. There's lots of manufacturing being built in Ukraine. There's a huge amount of opportunities in CNC machinery, automated factories, and the likes. So if you're in this, or if this is something you know about, or if you're engaged in that field, feel free to reach out to us. Feel free to reach out to our Ukrainian counterparts. You will have your, say, chambers of commerce. You'll be surprised what you can hear about the opportunities vested in cooperating with our Ukrainian friends. And Franz is completely correct. There's a lot of good things happening in Lviv end of September. There's a couple of those conferences. Friend of the space and former CEO of Ukrsalisnitsia, the National Railways of Ukraine, who've been the Iron Army of the country. Alexander Kamishin, who has become the Minister for Strategic Industries, has been all around the world, traveling about, making sure that he makes contacts, but also predominantly getting people into Ukraine to discuss as to how they can work together on key strategic industrial investment and production. There's loads and loads of good opportunities I can only highlight. In as much as it's great when people donate individual amounts to our fundraisers, but if your companies, the people you work with, or the companies you own, or the companies you have, say, a need of, say, extending their capabilities, feel inclined to work in Ukraine, that is a tremendous choice, and it should be considered. Thank you very much.
Can you hear me? Testing, testing.
Yeah, you test well. 555.
I'm sorry about that, Axel. I think I said too much and I was thrown off of the platform.
It's simple. I've reduced the get to H. Shackle.
Okay, as long as I get some kibble at the end, I'm not complaining. I've yet to get any from anybody, so I'll take what I can get.
Yeah, there's another elf.
Shutting up! Shutting up!
There's another 11 minutes during which you can completely ruin it.
In any case, bad jokes aside, I do apologize. I'm not sure if anybody tried to talk to me or said anything. I haven't heard the last 5-6 minutes of the conversation. This is one of the fun bits of live radio, and the platform is we sometimes get kicked. That being said, I was joking about it being targeted. I think it's just a bug that happens to all of us. With that, I have no idea where we were at, Axel, so I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, I was just advertising whilst you were cycling back up. I was advertising the opportunities which people can find in Ukraine and with our Ukrainian counterparts. And that's something which people should never fail to miss out on. And this is another thing. Pecunia non olet, money doesn't smell. But that also means it's not where the money originates from. I know people love to complain about this. No, it's something else. If you actually find a way to work with Ukrainian companies and make sure that they make some money and generate some income and you make some money with them, that's good. Do so. Pursue it. Find ways to do some trading. Trade and manufacturing is good.
100%, and anything that can be done right to help with that helps in a in other unintentional manners, right? One of the things I don't think we discuss enough on the program, and this is as much me as everybody else, is the state of the Ukrainian economy, right? And how people are doing on the ground. And I understand there are disparities depending on where you live, right? And various things. But in any case, right, there are issues. The production of many goods that Ukraine previously did have either been stopped or heavily impacted, right? Their food distribution network is not what it was as far as being able to bring in income. Many of their industries, right, have been affected. I know there was there is a video game project that I work on, and there were supposed to be extra levels and 10 extra hours worth of content, but the guy who was working on it got conscripted for the Ukrainian army, right? So he went to the front and he's not working on it anymore. So they had to cut out those 10 hours of content because it was 2-3 hours more, maybe 5-10 hours more work that needed to be done in order to finish it. But the rest of the team don't have the skill set necessary to do it, so it had to be completely cut. Right, this affects every level of society, from teachers and doctors and lawyers to the guys making your sandwiches and picking up your trash. Right, when you watch videos, whether they're taken footage or propaganda films of Ukrainian soldiers, look at the mix of people. They're everyday people who are volunteering. Look at the videos in the initial invasion on who was signing up and asking for an 8K and ready to sell themselves for the sake of stopping the Russian advance for 5 minutes. It's the everyday people, and that is really something amazing. But the adverse effect on this is we lose people. Right, I remember a couple of months ago there was a very famous torrent website for downloading things that was taken down, and the reason they took it down is they said we've lost 90% of the people that worked on this, either fighting in Ukraine or Russia, right? And that we cannot continue doing it. Several of them have died, and we cannot keep the site up, so we are taking it down, right? So in any case, it does make a difference, right? And I know of people that have specifically started businesses in Ukraine and are seemingly doing well, considering the war and everything, that are doing it, more altruistically than as a money-making, not that they're not trying to make money, but they could be doing it in another country and they're doing it there. So
I think making money in working with Ukraine is good, as long as it's good for Ukraine. If it's kosher, you do it. That's very simple. Fancy.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you on that line. As long as it's kosher, as long as it's a benefit of Ukraine and not rip off or something, it's great cooperation, great work with Ukraine. Something that resonated with me that Aya said, it's that there is troubles for Ukrainian companies. It's not only that there is people dying and people fighting. Something that we in the West need to put a lot of attention to. It's the electrical power infrastructure, because I also know some company from Odessa that was producing military pouches and stuff like that, and they simply had to stop their work inside Ukraine, looking for a way to resettle in the EU, which makes me sad, right, to see that, because if they leave now, probably they're not gonna be quickly back to Odessa. And I think what Ukraine needs is working energy infrastructure for businesses to continue running their machinery.
100%. And on that note, I've asked several times on this space and on other spaces previously, before I regularly joined this space. I have a $6,000 to $8,000 spin caster, which can be used for making bullets and other forms of metallurgy that I no longer need. At some point, I have to sell it. I have not, because of the tax effect of it and the fact they keep going up in value, even the used ones. But if there is an actual Ukrainian arms company, or the government is interested and anybody has any connections to that, and they are able to pay for it to be, shipped over there, I do not have the funds to do that. Please send me some info. I know I've sent other equipment that can be used with firefighting and stuff to a couple of organizations that have supposedly sent it over there. But this is beyond my ability. But this is the type of thing that can, allow a company that's operating out of a little warehouse or a basement that's making, let's say, 1,000 rounds or 1,000 bullet, not the packings and the shell, the casing, but the actual bullets, right, can make 10,000 a day. This allows them to make another 5-10,000. It makes a big difference. So that is something personal. If anybody has any info, I would love. But yes, helping Ukrainian companies makes a big difference, assuming it is kosher, right? I brought up the other thing just to explain how it affects every walk of life. You please double check before you invest in Ukrainian companies, because sadly there are scams and stuff, right? In the same way, there are sadly a lot of people that pretend to be Ukrainian soldiers, including those who have been killed, in the line of duty, to solicit donations. Please make sure to double check before you invest your money or give to anybody. It's very important. Back to you, Axel.
I was just about to say, we're not going to give anybody who's adult here financial advice, are we? No, we're not. But everybody here knows what they're doing. If you don't know what you're doing, get lost. Go away. Don't bother yourself with it, because then it's not worth doing anyway. As long as things are kosher and you've checked them yourself and it makes sense, it makes sense. Do it. If you feel uncomfortable, if you don't know what you're doing, don't do it. So simple. Bit of common sense.
Well said, Axel. Sadly, I think as the years go by, common sense is harder and harder to remember, even by those of us with a little bit of it. It's very easy to forget.
I sound like a complete and utter grandpa broken record.
Hey man, I was saying that in my early teens, so I feel like Rumpelstiltskin at this point.
I can go one step further. Life can lead to death.
it is the one inevitable. That I will say. That is the one thing we can all be certain of in this world. So the sooner you make your peace with that and start living your life, I do believe the happier you will be. And that is my experience from dealing with a lot of elderly people over my life, both as a care worker and, just knowing them, right? Those that seem to have made peace with that have much happier times, live longer, and have a much higher quality of life than those that are afraid of it. But in any case, this is going well off discussion, Axel. So I'm going to say my goodbyes as we have already we have almost hit the 4 p.m. slot when you and I are dropping. I will be back in an hour and a half to cover the second half of the next shift. But I will be taking a brief hiatus to go get my dog some food from the store and run a couple of other errands I need to get done first. So I just wanted to thank everybody who's been with us for the last 2 hours. We've had a couple of very interesting discussions. I do apologize that we don't have a ton of brand new news for you. It was a slower news day, but I do think we had a couple of very interesting and productive conversations. And thank you very much, Axel, for joining me today. It's always a pleasure co-hosting with you. Do you want to drop first, or should I?
I don't really care less. I just got myself a sensible drink and was about to make a silly joke to our troops in the background, but there you go. No, please carry on. And in the meantime, if you have any questions for us, which we try to address with all the common sense which we can muster this evening on a wonderful Sunday evening on the 25th of August, whilst the Ukrainian forces are still battling. And the reason why we're not talking about anything is, no, gosh, you guessed it, there's a blackout. Fancy, let's talk about what, Kaiserschmarrn?
I had to run for the phone now. Yeah, you can.
You heard Kaiserschmarrn.
You can always talk about Kaiserschmarrn with me. Happy to make some. That's kind of like an Austrian talent, or every Austrian should know how to make a Kaiserschmarrn, as every Ukrainian knows how to say Palanitsa. So there is the secret codes how to test if someone is a proper Austrian. So happy to make one for you next time I'm in Tallinn, or for anyone whom I meet in Lviv or Kiev.
Which brings me to the point. Lviv, end of September is probably a little bit early, but there will be another DEF conference. Commission is organizing for a number of companies, and I think many of us will be attending in some shape or another because it matters a great deal, and there's lots and lots of things going on. And whilst the Americans are not doing much, at least the Europeans are now starting, meaning in this case, private European companies. And that is something which I really like. And it's not just Rheinmetall, Kongsberg, and the likes, but I can see that there are affiliates of Leonardo making moves, and that makes me a happy man. I think that's great.
Yeah, I heard after the week in Lviv, there is gonna be some other conference as well. Maybe that's the one you're referring to. I asked a friend of mine to forward me more details. So maybe we'll see each other there. I'm certainly gonna head further east after the conference end of September.
Further east, like our friend Jason or Tom Much and others who have all gone the way, say, of the visa-free travel into Kurska Narodna Respublika.
Oh, that would be hilarious and fantastic. Yeah, I've certainly considered taking my funny Austrian car into Kursk, putting an Austrian, I don't know, like at least with Austrian number plates covered up to some extent, trolling the Austrian commentators of the war in Ukraine. or shall I say, Russian propagandists like Mangot, who got really out of breath when Ukraine rolled into Kursk, and he said, after the Second World War, this is the first time again that German tanks are rolling into Russia. And I can only imagine what happens if he sees some Austrians stepping into Russia. I think then he gets a heart attack, and maybe we won't hear him again.
I love the fact. What I really liked was the picture of the Challenger 2 tank and the Leopard 2, both evidently Ukrainian camo, both evidently shooting at the same time from two different groups. I mean, two different units of the Ukrainians, but close by on the same field, so to say, at the fringe of each other's flank, and shooting on Russian territory. Only Putin could do this, that British and German tanks would be on Russian territory. Fancy.
Yeah, I wanted to say it's actually beautiful to see that this time Germany has joined the side of good, and together with Great Britain and the rest of Europe, apart from a few unfortunate nations, everyone is working together towards one goal, towards freedom and democracy in Europe. I mean, Ukraine was fighting, in fact, for freedom and democracy. They established freedom and democracy, and then Russia got anxious and angry and wanted to stop them. And now we're helping Ukraine to retain freedom and democracy on Ukrainian sovereign territory. I wish that Biden actually said it more pronounced like that all the Ukrainian territory needs to be returned. But eventually, we're all fighting, also United States and Europe, for retaining freedom and democracy on Ukrainian territory. And I think we should be open to Kursk joining, right? So I saw a couple of videos where Kursk citizens, in fact, welcomed the change of command in the region. Which
have you not heard anything from the United Nations? And typically, they recommend that the serious concerns of the civil population in the area, the contested area, have to be taken into account by Russia in this instance, because this is not something which can be easily put off hand, and that the UN will send neutral observers to ensure that those serious concerns of the population are protected and preserved. Oh, sorry, no, they only do this when supposedly Russian, forces are there and agitators. Sorry, I forgot. I apologize.
Yeah, unfortunately, United Nations have signed off 2.5 years ago. I know what they're doing now. I think the only thing, one has to be fair, the IAEA to some extent is doing okay work to continue the world's cooperation on nuclear, with the tiny caveat that within Ukraine, they also are Russia's little puppets, especially when it comes to reporting on violation of safety and attacks on nuclear power plants. So, but besides that, I think that's the only organization I would keep. And I think the rest, my opinion, the rest we can just shut down and reopen with sane nations. I think, unfortunately, as it stands now with China and Russia in Security Council as veto powers, it doesn't make any sense to continue it in its current shape. But that's just my opinion, and I know many don't share it.
Alrighty. In the meantime, I've seen that Peter has joined us, and Prince is there as well. Hello there.
Hello, how are you today, Axel? It is good to see you. I know that it is evening for you and your day is almost complete. And I am just, I feel like I'm just starting my day, but I have drank my coffee, so that is a good sign. I may be able to speak.
Oh, there you go. At least you also have Choo Choo with you, so you're good to go.
I do. I have the Choo Choo with me, and Choo Choo took a trip to Ukraine, and I have a feeling that Choo Choo should have lots to share with us, and that is a good thing.
Well, then I will return to my tools and toys. I'll send you a photo in a second and bid you good night and good luck. But I'll be sticking around for the last drink, which I have here in my hand, given the fact that I'm really not interested in doing further maintenance on many things. Peter, no, I'm not going to fix that little model train for you.
Okay, Axel, no problem. Yes, I'm here. I'm ready. I am good to go. So when you want to drop down, Axel, that's absolutely fine, and I will take the seat and try to run the show. I've been out of touch for the last few days. Strangely enough, running a train, but there we go. Not a problem. We will get back into the swing of things and continue as before. And yeah, I am unfortunately back in the UK now. I didn't want to leave Ukraine, but I had to, and I will be back soon. Don't know when, but I certainly will be back. So there we are. Thank you very much. So there you have it, Axel. Thanks.
All righty, so here we go. I have seen a few bits of news, a few interesting bits of news today, but I have been actually catching up with messages for most of the time that I've been awake, and you know I actually don't want to talk about the one piece of news that I have been able to follow, but Peter, and I have Peter and Fancy up here. Peter, you just returned from Ukraine. And so and I know you are a train guy. You love the trains, and so I thought perhaps if you were willing and able, I'm sure you're able, but to tell us about a little bit about your trip, because you actually, most people I know, they don't try to go to, the east part of Ukraine, and I know you definitely made an attempt to go east. Well, that you did go east. You made an attempt to go farther east, and unfortunately, I don't think you made it south. But I'm very interested in hearing about it because um, your travel, having been there before, right? And being there now, I think is a good comparison and a good contrast. What do you say, Peter?
I made an attempt to go to Suja. I made an attempt to go to the Kursk People's Republic, but I didn't get that far, which is not totally surprising. Although, yeah,
Before I went to bed, there's a beautiful video of some babusas basically saying Sudzha is Ukraine. So there you could have just gone into Ukraine that way. But I know you made a valiant attempt, but it didn't work. But keep on going.
yeah. So I did get as far east as Kharkiv, which I wanted to go to. I didn't have time to go any further. Any further than that. I did actually want to go to Odessa as well, but just didn't have time because I only had a sort of 5-day window to do everything that was possible, and with a couple of trains being full, or I think one of them not even running, which just doesn't help. I can usually do my best to get on trains via one means or another. But when the train doesn't run on that particular day, then that's a tricky one. So I got defeated on that score, but anyway, I did get to where I needed to, and I got to Sumy and Kharkiv and Kiev and Lviv as well, which was good. So yeah, and it's the first time I've really been in. I was thinking it's not really the first time I've been in a country at war, because I was resident in the UK when we went to war with the Falklands, because the Argentinians invaded us in about 1982, 1983. But that's kind of different because we weren't under rocket and missile attack. It's the first time I've been anywhere which is subject to attacks. and subject to sort of indiscriminate incoming drone, rocket fire, missiles, that kind of thing, and that certainly felt totally different to anywhere else I'd been, despite the fact I've been to Ukraine many times before. It was just a completely different experience this time, even though the places were the same. So there we are. Yes, I did try to go to Suja. I would also probably say yes, Suja is Ukraine, or it certainly is now. But I've seen that the thing of that the picture of the Suja residents apparently quite happy to be in Ukraine rather than Russia. And I think there's some historical significance of Suja. It was previously part of Ukraine and had some significance during some turmoil or something. I can't remember the exact reason. A treaty was signed there or something. I can't remember. It was explained to me, but it's gone out of my head a few days later. So that's quite interesting. And of course, a lot of the large proportion of the population in Suja are in fact sort of either Ukrainian or sort of have Ukrainian contacts, and quite a number of them even speak Ukrainian, which is quite interesting, and now happy to do so. So yeah, there we are. I'll be no problem to tell you most of what you want to know about my recent trip to Ukraine. Well, unfortunately, it was, as I said, rather brief, but I hope to put that right by going back for longer at some point in the reasonably near future. I would hope so. There we are.
Very good, very good. Thank you so much, Peter. And I do think it's interesting that you tried to get over into Suja, and I know that you had difficulty doing that. And boy, do I wish you would have been able to hook up with Jason and Sergey that day, because you guys, they managed to get into Suja, and you did not. Of course, you both took very different methods, and from hearing you talk about it previously, and knowing that the way that you were going about it, we're really glad that it didn't work out for you, Peter, because it would have been extremely dangerous. But the effort is very interesting. I mean, when you got there, and I heard you talking, and that you were going to be heading to Sumi, excuse me, you were going to be heading to Sumi. My initial thought was, what is this guy thinking going to Sumi, one of the places that gets hit so regularly? And then I understood why. And also just you just plow forward and go to where you want to go. And you've done so much traveling, especially by train, that I think that the methods and the ways to keep yourself safe, and that's a good thing. So and even though Kharkiv is a place that gets battered, more often than Kiev, I knew that you would be much safer there. So it was good to see you. It's actually hanging out in a hotel room and snacking, and just being comfortable and safe. Were there more? Obviously, I think there were probably more air raids when you were in Kharkiv. Did you bother to go to any air raid shelters, or did the air raid alarms interrupt stuff that you were doing at all?
I didn't actually go to any air raid shelters, although I was warned in Kharkiv not to ignore them. I didn't exactly ignore them. However, I bought I bought a Ukrainian phone. Well, I bought a sort of spare phone for use exclusively in Ukraine, which was an iPhone SE, which didn't cost very much, but it appears to be so old that you can't contact the App Store, so I couldn't load the air warning siren thing onto it. But I had that on another phone, which was live some of the time, but not when I was right near the border. So it's best to turn UK phones off when you get too near the border. So I heard a number of air raid warnings, which was the first time I'd ever heard a live air raid warning. And I've heard them in the early months of the war. I was following the Kiev the Kiev live cam at Maidan Square, which I was astonished remained live for the first sort of month and a half of the war before they took it offline, and heard many air raid sirens then. So I knew what they sounded like, but when you hear one in reality, it's slightly different. I certainly heard them in Kiev and Sumy and Kharkiv, and I think they were going off in Poltava district as I went through Poltava on a train and stuff. So it was the first time. What I actually did, I tended to just follow the locals and do what they did, and by and large, they kind of didn't bat an eyelid. In Kharkiv, there was well, it wasn't an air raid shelter, but it was described as a shelter, sort of down in the basement of the hotel or the lower floor where it happened to be the breakfast rooms anyway. But in the night, I was in my hotel room, and if the air raid shelter, how do you go? Well, I suppose you set an alarm, and the alarm wakes you up, and you go to the air raid shelter. But I was in the hotel, I felt safe, and quite honestly, unless a rocket fell right on my hotel, I basically wasn't going to have a problem. As it happens, about 9 months ago, last October, a rocket did fall right in the street, right outside the hotel, and shattered all the glass of the surrounding properties, which were still boarded up. And the hotel had been, if it was damaged, had been fixed and was back in service, but the other properties around it were still sort of shuttered up. And to a certain extent, I sort of took the view that, well, lightning doesn't strike twice in the same place. If it happened, it happened. And, well, those things. Anyway, I woke up the next morning, everything was fine, there was no problem. And but I think there had been drones going overnight towards Sumy and Poltava and through Kharkiv and then elsewhere that night I was there. And as I was in Sumy, we, after getting halfway to the Russian border at Suja, because we didn't get any further, we then had a bit of time to look around Sumy, and the taxi driver took me to a place which had received a rocket attack the previous day, and that was about 0600 in the morning, the day I had arrived in Kiev, and I'd arrived at Kiev on the train at 0513, a very convenient time. And after I'd been in Ukraine, there had been a rocket attack, and there were a load of burnt-out cars in a car park of a shop. Some damage to the shop, and I think some damage, certainly broken windows and stuff, to the residential area, sort of right by the shop. I don't know if there were any, and if there's anyone killed in that, but it was sort of, it was a weird experience to see the damage that had happened whilst I was in Ukraine, literally 24 hours earlier. And it just, in my case, it just sort of triggers a kind of defiance, really, and disgust, and not really any kind of fear or anything, just disgust. And and then
Sumy gets it every day, right?
That's I mean, basically, it's
since the full-scale invasion, there's not a single day where Sumy has not been either attacked, invaded upon, had been fighting to reject and dispatch the Russians, or been bombed thereafter. Not a single day.
And I think, isn't that true for Kharkiv as well? I would say.
Kharkiv actually got lucky. Kharkiv had 4 or 5 days during which nothing came down.
4 or 5 days in 2.5 years. Okay, all right.
Yes.
Well, fair enough.
So they're very lucky, privileged.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that, it's just geography that they're quite close to the border, so they get it, and the Russians know they can terrorize the citizens because they're so close. They can just launch these rockets, and no sooner have they launched them, the Ukrainians haven't really got time to work out what's going on before the rockets land. Whereas Kiev, being several hundred kilometers into Ukrainian territory, the Ukrainians have at least got a bit more time to sort of radar track the incoming fires and try and shoot them down, whereas you just don't have that luxury in Kharkiv and Sumy. And certainly the city centre of Sumy was of Kharkiv was much more evident of the rocket attacks, and the windows sort of blanked out and boarded off. But of course, you can't compare one with the other because Kharkiv is a much bigger city than Sumy, so it's not sort of it's not really comparable. You do have high-rise blocks in Sumy, quite a number of them, but there's a lot more sort of built up. A lot more properties of sort of 5 and more floors in Kharkiv in the centre. So that there's more evidence of the attacks there, even if there has been some days where they haven't received attacks. But there wasn't really any evidence that I could pick up on in Sumy of sort of defeat or resignation. It was just there's definitely a weariness to the war, and people are tired of it. But I think that's different from saying that they're prepared to accept anything on Russia's terms. I think they all, as far as I could see, the people that I spoke to anyway, they understand that that there's no sort of compromise, and they've got to sort of press forward and impose Ukrainians terms on Russia, and that's it. And after trying to get a ride with Uber from Sumy to Suja, which strangely enough, Uber had no rides available, and I did.
You should have taken Bolt.
I should have taken Bolt. Yeah, damn. Yeah, I knew I'd done something wrong.
It cracks me up that you tried to get an Uber. I don't know why it does. It cracks me up. I tried to Uber to go into Russia.
Well, it just struck me at the time as a spur of the moment. Let's just try this and see what happens. And strangely enough, and it's interesting that I was also looking on the Apple app for the mapping app, and of course it showed Suja, and it showed the entire road network, a whole load of junctions closed, and there's sort of no-go sign and roads sort of closed, and the entire ring around Suja itself. So that was quite interesting that it showed it sort of live in real time, right on the other side of the border. In theory, it showed the border up to the border as open on the Apple mapping system, but you'd have had a big deal to actually get right up to the border, because there were a series of road checks, roadblocks of increasing sort of severity, and by the time we got about halfway, it was clear that we kind of needed a valid reason to get through, and the taxi driver was getting a bit nervous and didn't really want to go any further. And we found out later that the part of the road was mined, and you need to know where to drive. And of course, the military guys, do know where to drive and what the path through the minefield is. And the other thing that was quite interesting is that all the military vehicles, and there were a lot of them going in both directions, had a very specific marking on them, and clearly, we found out afterwards, if you didn't have that marking on your vehicle, you were assumed to be hostile and were liable to Ukrainian drone attack. And bear in mind that there are Ukrainian drones up in the air and Russian drones up in the air as well. So it's not a very good environment for going on a random taxi journey. But that was sort of further nearer the border. And I later found out. So I think I arrived in Sumy at 8:49. I think it was. The first air raid went off at about 9:45, less than an hour later, and I later discovered that Jason J. Smart and Sergei Sumleny had set off from Sumy round about 10 o'clock whilst I was there. And had I known whether I could have gone with them, I don't know. I mean, Jason J. Smart's got got journalist accreditation that's recognised by the AFU. I mean, he's well known sort of in the area, and Sergei Sulemy is even better because he's had a lot of support.
And Sergei got the Humvee.
Yeah, he's had a lot of support with the Ukrainian, army, and knows
Just
a
got
lot
fucking lucky because the boys were there from a unit which he knew from before. The boys were there; they were doing their thing, and therefore he had an opportunity, which is great. And this is how you should be. If you're lucky because you've done something right, you get the opportunity. Nobody else would have gotten across that day. Trust me.
Yeah, I think that's right. To be honest, I mean that was my experience exactly, and it's just funny that we were both trying to do it the same day, but they'd been trying to do it the previous day, and they failed to get across the previous day. I think because there was an actual live operation going on, and obviously, and they didn't want a journalist tied up in the middle of that. So, yeah, I think you're right. There was a big element of luck about it. And I didn't have that sort of luck, but it was interesting, that's something we found out was there on the same
He
day.
called out for, and you were late also because Sergei called out for this 24 hours beforehand, and you didn't react.
What do you mean he called out for it?
Sergei sent a message out around to people before, like 24 hours before, and who's on site, who's who in the zoo, and who's there, who's on first, who's on second.
Oh, I didn't know that. Well, I was on a train on my way from Kiev, or I was trying to get on a train at to 3:23 in the morning or something from Kiev to Sumy, and all train tickets were sold out. So I had my own issues to worry about. I didn't know that I was actually going to arrive until I did. But yeah, I had not seen his message or responded to it. If I had have done, whether that would have made any difference, I don't know, because I didn't know in advance before that, so yeah, difficult. But yeah, it was an interesting experience, and it was an interesting day to be there. But unfortunately, I had so little time, and my entire trip in Ukraine, I was kind of cramming as much in as I could and trying to visit the places I wanted to, and couldn't visit one of the places, Odessa. So I'll have to do that another time. But and yeah, a lot of the trains were full to Odessa as well because Ukrainians are going there for sort of summer holidays and breaks and that. So that's another factor that had to be factored in, because whereas obviously these trains are sort of sleeping car trains, generally the long distance ones, you need reservations on them, and one is encouraged to book in advance, sometimes weeks in advance, but that's sort of anathema to me. I just turn up and jump on trains. I don't believe in having to do these things like an airline months in advance. It's not my idea of what a railway system, railway network is for. So anyway, it was interesting, and it was a sort of worthwhile day, and certainly on that road to halfway, as it were, towards Suja, watching the vehicles and what I can only describe as a sort of 21st century logistics supply chain in progress before my eyes was quite an eye opener, and an interesting experience, and the way they sort of organised the roadblocks, and how it was sort of managed. And obviously, clearly the risks that those guys were taking in being there, and they must have been aware that they were, they could have been subject to drone attacks and also even more. And a huge respect from my point of view to people those guys involved, because there's a lot of people who are really very brave. Far braver than me. I was just bungling around in a taxi, which is probably not the best thing to do, but nothing compared to what those guys must be going through, going up to and beyond the border. And yeah, very interesting. So
should we send some people from the Kentish town, Red Ken and Red Kier party over there to experience this so that they get this?
Yeah, I think it would be a good idea. I think it would open their eyes as well as to what is actually going on, and not only the sort of things that on the Suja area, but also in areas of Ukraine that have been occupied or have been subject to rocket attacks, stuff like that, to get them to understand what this is actually about. And the partners that they have supported in the past, shall we say. What Axel is referring to is that certain aspects of the Labour Party in the UK or the current government, shall we say, have been sympathetic in the past to Moscow, put it that way. And
Oh no!
Oh no!
Have they been, Peter? Terrible.
They've probably been more than sympathetic, actually. Supportive, should we even say? Or are they even now?
Did they praise like Bernie Sanders and his party ilk also, and like Tucker Carlson, who, funny enough, and Bernie Sanders and Tucker Carlson being one, it's fantastic. They praised the beauty of the Moscow metro. Oh yes, he did, Jeremy Corbyn. Oh gosh, he did. But then again, Mr. Starmer stands for a completely different party. He was never there when Jeremy Corbyn was anti-Semitic and hard communist left. He was never praising him. No, not at all. Never. He was never even working with him. Peter, can you please deny that Keith Starmer ever worked with Jeremy Corbyn?
I can't deny that, because he did work with Jeremy Corbyn, and he was quite happy to be there, sort of under Jeremy Corbyn. But when Jeremy Corbyn got rejected by the electorate, he then I think put himself forward as an alternative. But he didn't
Communism
dissent.
and anti-Semitism doesn't work, and he found that out in a commonsensical British public. Of course, it doesn't.
Yeah, so he then effectively stepped up, having been quite happy to be part of the Jeremy Corbyn show, which never happened, strangely enough. I don't think he was actually. I mean, to be fair to him, although I'm not his biggest fan, but he didn't accept. He wasn't offered a what do you call it? A shadow minister, position on the front bench. So he didn't have a primary position. However, he didn't really need to be offered or to accept one of those. He was sort of part of the party, and he was on the Corbyn bandwagon, as it were, by being an MP.
He was in the engine room. Keith Starmer has been in the engine room for ages. So let's not lie about it. So good old commies never change. But there you go. Having said this, and let's lambast them further when they fail, but let's hope that he does the right thing. How was your culture shock when you came back to Blighty? How did it feel not being bombed? How did it feel not being in, constant attention to where would the next things come down? Air raid alerts and the likes. And how did it feel when finally the media is talking about completely different things, which have a kind of a Joanna Lumley kind of eyes in the headlights view?
So, well, it didn't. I mean, I was in Ukraine for such a short time. It didn't. It didn't feel any different back in the UK to what it had kind of 5 days previously. So, or 6 days previously, whatever, when including the journeying time. So that wasn't massive, but it just. I don't know. I think it does affect you, having been to somewhere and actually been subject to air raid warning sirens, and just feeling that this is definitely real, and it's not just media reporting, or it's not just sort of guff going on, and certainly people in the UK who, I mean, I've just given up following the mainstream media, because they're just such an absolute load of nonsense. But the irritation with how the mainstream media, it just has the attention span of a mosquito, and cannot follow through on what's going on in Ukraine, because it's perceived as no longer news, because it's been happening for 2.5 years. It's just normal, and it's therefore not worth reporting on, which of course is totally incorrect. There's nothing normal about it at all when a European city is subject to just multiple European cities are subject to constant bombardment, drone attacks, and especially at the time when the media is pushing nonsense about Putin being ready for talks, because that's a Russian talking point, when that is blatantly not true, when they're sending, these squads of what do you call it, these groups of drones, it is, because they sort of send these drones across in groupings, different groupings, and then use them as sort of cover for missile attacks, try to preoccupy the air defenses with the drones, and then send missiles in at the same time, and when that's still going on pretty much on a nightly basis, and the media is not talking about it, and they should be, because this cannot be perceived as normal. It shouldn't be allowed to go unreported, because it is news every day, even though may have been happening for 2.5 years or whatever. It doesn't mean it's not newsworthy. The media is really doing us a disservice, and itself a disservice, by not reporting it, by just assuming that we've reported that ages before, and it's we don't need to report it anymore. But to my mind, that's just not the case. You've still got a situation where you cannot travel by air to Ukraine at all, because all Ukrainian airports, Ukrainian airspace in its entirety is closed. And again, that is a big thing. I'm more or less not exactly happy, but I don't have a problem with going to Poland and then getting on a train into Ukraine. But obviously a lot of other people do, because they want to go to Ukraine directly, and of course they can't. And the only way to get to Ukraine now is to go by train from a neighbouring country, or from a choice of the neighbouring countries, and that is just that should not be the case. And at the moment, in the current circumstances, there's no practical alternative. But the fact that's been the case for 2.5 years is kind of outrageous. And you've still got the situation where certain airlines, I could mention names, Turkish and Emirates, for example, are still flying to Moscow, and taking passengers, and often, exploiting ridiculously high fares. And that's permitted, and it's not possible to operate air traffic at all to Ukraine, and that should be a big story, and it just isn't. The media are not just ignoring it, or not reporting it, or don't think it's a thing. It's just crazy. And I mean, I would like to see the Ukrainians do more to close down civil airspace in Russia, and that may mean sort of taking out a few civilian aircraft in key locations during the night when there's no passengers on them, or something like that. I wouldn't object if a few, for example, Domodedovo and Sheremetyevo in Moscow received a few drones during night. I guess they won't, because the Ukrainians have got more interesting military targets. But it's unfair that the Ukrainians have had their civil airspace just taken out of action, and the Russians, although there's been a lot of they've had to adapt to sanctions and less aircraft, and obviously massively less airlines flying to Russia. The airspace is still open, and to Russia, within Russia, the airspace is still open, and in my mind, it shouldn't be. That should have been closed off. Now, how that's done and who does that is you can debate about, but to my mind,
you can now sing about Pennsylvania Avenue.
Yeah, that's right, exactly. Yeah, and in action when it should have done, exactly. So yeah, we know a song about that, as the saying goes. But oh dear, yeah. I mean, in a sense, my visit there just reinforces kind of all my previous views. I would say I didn't learn anything; I learned a lot, but it just, from what I see, it just reinforces all my previous experience and views that the Ukrainians are not being supported to the degree to which they're entitled to be, and it's our politicians who are letting the side down because they're happy to see this thing drag on and just continue to attrite Russian military almost to oblivion, and that seems to be their strategy. But it completely ignores the fact that you've got millions of Ukrainians who are subject to this ridiculous situation that should have never happened, and the Western politicians, frankly, don't seem too bothered about it, and they bloody well should be bothered about it because it's a threat to us, it's a threat to them, it's a threat to our way of life, it's a threat to our civil liberties, our freedoms, and if we don't deal with this in Ukraine, we know, because the Russians have said, and by Russians I mean the media organizations that are backed by the Kremlin and that are told what to say by the Kremlin, they have said they'll be rolling into Berlin, Poland, Warsaw, and the Baltic states and everywhere else. So it's not exactly rocket science to work out what their game is, and it just seems to be the response seems to be completely inadequate and ineffective, or not ineffective, but not effective as not effective enough, and frankly, a stain on our responsibilities as members of the international community in dealing with what is fundamentally a criminal enterprise, a mafia organization which has just basically taken over a country. And that's what it should be called out as, and that's what the West should be saying Russia is, and they're not saying that, and they continue to treat Russia as a sort of quote normal country, or as a country in its own right, when it isn't basically a country. It's basically a bunch of thugs and crooks who have hijacked a country. And hijacked an economy and a global petrol station, and if they were treated like that, like what they are, then the whole thing would be a lot easier to resolve by means of saying, look, if you're going to do business with these crooks, then you're not going to do business with us, and that is exactly how that should be dealt with. This situation should be dealt with, and how you deal with bullies and thugs and hooligans, and that's how you deal with them on a sort of micro level. Well, why would you deal with them any different on a macro level? Why would you even bother being part of any international organizations that wanted to have this criminal state part of it? You just walk away or tell them to get lost, and you're not going to be involved in any international organizations. If those international organizations like the UN and the IAEA and all the others can't get their own house in order, then frankly they should they should understand that there is no point in trying to operate if they can't deal with Russia of their own accord within their own internal systems, and therefore the other civilized nations are just frankly gonna walk away and not get involved with anything that Russia is involved with. But that's just my opinion, and not everybody agrees with it. Some people think it's worth sticking with the UN and these other organisations. I could mention football organisations as well. They're bloody the most corrupted, one of the most corrupted. Anyway, and the Olympics, of course, and all that. And it's not surprising because the Kremlin's been pouring money into these organisations for decades, and corrupting them and making sure that the Russian talking points are addressed and are there. Anyway, that's my view. That's another bit of a rant, but it comes from my sort of general feeling, having been to Ukraine for, as I say, 5 days.
Well meandered, but still, it hasn't answered one question. If you watch the Beep this evening, if you listen to Let me think. In your case, probably Radio 4. You feel that they get it right?
Well, I don't listen to the Beeb anymore, and the reason I stopped listening to them was because their coverage of Ukraine, which is about something I do know about, was so appalling. I've just consider their entire output now as suspect, because if they can't get it right about something I know about, how the hell can I trust them to get it right about something which I've no idea, i.e. the rest of the news, or other things that are outside my knowledge. So do I trust them to get it right on Ukraine? Absolutely not. No way, because they're just not getting it right at all. They're just trying to present both sides, and again, that it comes back to the same thing. They just don't get that the Russian administration is a mafia enterprise, is a criminal enterprise, and and therefore their whole reporting is totally biased and totally skewed, because they're treating Russia as a legitimate country, and it isn't a legitimate country. It's a bunch of mafia thugs. And if they were to report it like that, then I might bother to listen to them, because their reporting might be credible. So so if you were asking the question, how
They
much
still
do I trust the
equivocate.
Beeb?
They still equivocate. They still highlight one side and the other. They still try to balance it out. They still project Russia to be an entity where decisions are made by people more than the few amongst and around Putin. They still deny that what you just highlighted, that it's a dictatorship, that it's a totalitarian state. They still deny that this is our adversary. They still deny the existence of evil, because, gosh forbid, if you were to take a stance towards evil, you would have to make that stance on oh so many issues. That might be appalling to some of our listeners, especially in Bradford.
Yeah, I think let's leave Bradford aside, trying to explain to the viewers who aren't familiar with UK about Bradford. But yeah, it's just ridiculous. You can understand why the BBC has a remit to be impartial and to be balanced and to be sort of objective, and that's because it's public service broadcasting, and because that's its sort of its ethos and its background. But it's absurd to apply that to a situation where you've got a criminal state like the Kremlin attacking a perfectly legitimate neighbor, which is a sort of thriving, decent, good democracy, that, yeah, like all countries, has got various issues of one sort or another, and to divert into those issues, on the will of Kremlin talking points that are just basically all red herrings, and ignore the real story going on here, is just ridiculous. And they should be able to see through that, and they should be able to report what is really going on. And as somebody said, the best way is, as a journalist, if somebody says, the sun is shining, and somebody says no, it's not, it's raining like hell, your job as a journalist is not to report both those sides and say, well, the reality must be somewhere in the middle. Your job is to look out the window and see what's going on and report reality, not to report what one side says, what another side says, and say, so, well, so the truth must be somewhere in between. No, it's not true. One side might be true, and the other side might be a complete pack of lies, as it generally is. So you don't take them on of equal value, and, as you say, equivalence. You actually call out one side as a complete pack of lies, and the other side, well, they have a history of actually telling the truth, and there's good reason to what they say is probably correct and is plausible. So you ignore the nonsense, and they just don't seem capable of that. They seem so, or rather, the Kremlin is so aware of the BBC's duty to be impartial and to be balanced. They
Yeah,
exploit
but you should only be impartial at home, domestically. when it is your people, when it is the community of the fair-minded, the democratic people in Britain. And if you want to expand it, you could be, fair-minded amongst the European nations, not the French, of course. That's fine. But you shouldn't be fair-minded and balance out when talking about Mordor. There's a reason why evil has to be portrayed as evil. There is a reason why it matters a great deal to name the enemy. There is a reason why you once had a sensible prime minister who spoke about exactly that.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Yeah, I mean, the impartiality is required where it's political issues within the UK, and even the one could question the BBC's fulfillment of that
No, it was the Beep has always been impartial. Come on, please. Otherwise,
less.
why would? Of course, Peter. No, you cannot say this. The Beep has never been on the side of Polly Toynbee. You cannot say that.
Okay. Whether all of our international listeners will understand who Polly Toynbee is. You've got a very good handle on it, having lived in the UK and followed UK politics more than most foreigners. You're very aware of what's going on here, but most of our listeners probably aren't. So Polly Toynbee is a left-wing Guardian journalist, and the Guardian is one of the relatively few left-wing papers in the UK. Yes, I think that's what you're driving at. So, yeah, I mean, UK politics is sort of quite difficult and tricky, and it's probably best not to go down too much of a rabbit hole there. But what's good about the UK politics situation as regards Ukraine is that both the parties, the Conservatives, who were in power until recently, until July, and the Labour Party, who is in power now, sort of openly, at least, completely support Ukraine, are on side and are on the same book in terms of aid. Although they're much better at announcing aid than they are at actually delivering it. I find, to my irritation, relatively recently, as the war's been going on. There's so many of these things have been announced, and in the case of the UK, rather a small proportion of it has actually been provided, which is extremely irritating. But that, frankly, doesn't surprise me with our politicians, with whom I'm not wildly inspired, nor is the rest of the population in general, I would say. Yeah, but the BBC is just has lost the plot in my mind. And do I trust them? No, I just don't trust them anymore, and largely because of their Ukraine reporting being so poor, and inadequate, and this nonsense about sort of trying to sort of show both sides and trying to present themselves as the authoritative voice, and sort of trying and, in my view, failing to actually advise people what's really going on, because they just don't address the reality of Russia's position and the nature of the regime in the Kremlin. They just choose to either ignore that or to not report it. I mean, one bloke who is pretty good is Steve Rosenberg in reporting from Russia, and it's quite strange that he's still in Moscow and still able to report, and he probably has to be quite careful about what he says. And he reviews Russian papers and stuff, and he's actually quite good. But some of the other members of the team, the BBC team who report on Ukraine, I just get the impression they just completely don't understand what's going on, and they're kind of deluded, and not really seeing the situation as it is. But the BBC, in my mind, should know better. Yeah, they're subject to a lot of budget cuts, and they haven't got the sort of news people on the ground that they used to have, because they have been cut back quite a lot, as other organisations have had to adapt to sort of harsher economic circumstances in the last 10-15 years. But they should still be capable of sort of telling people what is going on, and what the situation is, and what the sort of what's the word, what the sort of state of play is in terms of international politics. That's what they sort of specialize in, and they're just not getting the Kremlin thing right at all, in my mind, and not telling people what is actually going on. So my level of trust in the BBC has sort of just gone, basically. So that's kind of where I stand, and that's where I'm happy to nail my sort of colours to the mast on that score, and that's just totally over Ukraine. And if that is the situation with Ukraine, how can I trust them on other reporting, including things like the Israeli situation, which I'm not as well up on myself as I am on Ukraine. So where I know much less about a situation, then I'm just inclined to sort of now treat all BBC reporting as highly suspect, because they can't get things that I do know about right. And I think a lot of people are coming into that school of thought, because in the old days, the BBC sort of dominated the news messaging, whereas now it's increasingly challenged by the internet and by other sources and other storylines, rather than what's in the mainstream media. Plus, of course, you have this situation of sort of target messaging of individual groups or individual people. So you don't have sort of one news agenda anymore. You have lots of different things, but you are fed lots of different things on an individual basis, according to what is sort of presented in your timeline, rather than what the actual main stories might be. They're feeding you what they think might be of interest to you. And that's a danger, because it does drive people in different directions and sort of polarizes society when you're only being fed things that they think some algorithm thinks you're interested in. Anyway, yes, Axel.
I was about to send you something which you will definitely like, but for people who are have currently their set up for BBC International, and just go on to bbc.com. If you're based in Europe, the top right corner of your news says on the beep, British man killed after journalists hit in Ukraine strike. Is there any better way of describing why the BBC is completely, utterly nuts? These were Russian strikes.
Yeah,
Ukraine.
exactly. Yeah, they seem afraid to call out Russia because of
insanity, despicable.
Yeah,
it is amoral. This is so clearly an abuse of language that it is only to be seen to be deliberate. And I can find out if necessary who posted this, but I wouldn't be surprised to find out that I know exactly who it is. I find it despicable. It's a bad case of hardcore, very, very un-British behavior. It's exceptionally pro-Russian. And it's from the same people who bring you on the same page bad news about Israel because they hate Israel. It's insane. It makes you sick.
Yeah,
But at the same time, by the way, they also say man surrenders and confesses to Germany's having attack. The man, reportedly wearing bloodstained clothes, turned himself into Solingen police. The man is a Muslim refugee from Syria who's been killing 3 and injuring 6. The Beeb is sick.
I think, like a lot of these news organisations, that they've effectively been corrupted by Russian money, and I wouldn't mind betting that it's a combination of either these mice thing. It's money, ideology. What was the other one? Compromat or ego. And it's probably a combination of all those things. There's an element of people who work for the BBC who are sort of idealistic and sort of, want to think that sort of this utopian world of well, what should we say, socialist sort of socialist ideals that will be a better way of
take the original. Utopian is right. It's called Utopia in Jean-Jacques Rousseau's treatise.
Yeah. And I dare say they've received money and benefits from their dealings and reporting on Russia, and that helps them to that encourages them to give Russia an easy ride, as it were. And with their correspondence in Moscow and other places in Russia, they're probably wanting to protect them and make sure they aren't thrown out. So they sort of go a little bit easier on Russia than they would do in any sort of normal circumstance. And they basically have been again, like all these big organizations, and Russia is very good at recognizing these and targeting these and subverting them. I wouldn't mind betting there is a lot of history of Russian involvement in attempting to manipulate the BBC and manipulate the messaging, and that would just tie up entirely with what the output that we're seeing. Because why would the BBC describe as that as what did you say, Ukraine attack or something, or Ukraine strike? I mean, it's not a Ukrainian strike; it's a Russian strike. But they simply won't name the country. They won't name Russia, like on their front page.
Everybody who just sees it, Peter.
Yeah,
everybody who just sees it is immediately taken back and says, "A Ukraine strike." Oh my God, Ukraine strikes a British man. That's my point.
Yeah, which is totally misleading and totally wrong. And they shouldn't say that. They should say Russian strike. When it was on Ukrainian territory.
Russian strike on Ukraine. British man hurt in Russian strike on Ukraine. Then we can start talking. But nobody in the Beep who can't even name an Islamo-fascist murderer as what he is in Germany. We're not talking Britain, where they can't name anyone in Bradford because they're afraid of this. They can't name a grooming gang somewhere in, I don't know, the places where your TV cook once played around to try to improve the nourishment of boys and girls in schools, whilst at the same time the girls were being groomed. You make the same mistake as the Germans do. We allow too much tendentious shit.
Yeah, I'd probably agree with that, because there's this there's this politically correct way of dealing with things now, and that's how things have to be dealt with. And the police are afraid to sort of get involved in any issues concerning race or concerning immigration.
But it's not right. We're not talking race. We're not following the American debate. That's not the point. No. That's not what we're doing here. We're talking about people who come to our countries and then start killing people, or people who invade our countries, such as in Ukraine. The Russians come into Ukraine to kill people. We're talking about those who invade to kill. That's what we're talking about. That's not race. That's nothing. It's an invasion.
Yes, sorry, my mic was open then. Well, yeah. I mean, it's certainly the case in openly in terms of Russia and Ukraine. I don't think there's a lot of people that come to the UK to kill people. I think where that does happen occasionally, and I think in this case in Solingen, whether it's somebody who's gone there deliberately, it's but more likely, a sort of an individual instance where somebody's gone mad as a result of their situation. Not mad, but they have there's mental issues or whatever, mental welfare issues which have resulted in this particular outcome. Rather than it being a sort of deliberate plan of attack. Whereas what you have in Russia.
But then again, we have a lot of them, and we have a lot of these individual mental situations of those who have come to our place from different civilizations. I'm sorry to say so. This is not the first thing. This is not the first knife attack. It's not the first deliberate killing. It's something which is cultural. It's meant to be because they are in a completely different culture mode, and it makes you sick because we have the same thing with the Russians, culturally completely inept.
Yeah, I'm not sure I compare the two. I mean, I think you obviously, in terms of immigration, if they are giving the right of asylum to people who have applied for it legitimately, then, and I'm not sure they are, but if they were doing that, then the people who are applying for that are likely to come from sort of war-torn areas and be traumatized, and therefore it's not surprising they have a higher level of sort of traumatization and mental issues to deal with, and that some of those result in unfortunate or bad outcomes. Not that the authorities shouldn't be managing that and shouldn't be keeping track of that, but that's different from a situation where you've got the Kremlin, wantonly invading a neighbor because of its sort of own fascist ideals. The danger is where you've got these rogue actors, Iran, Russia, China, North Korea. You'll have those types of regimes exploiting the immigration issue, either to sort of feed in nefarious actors and agents and people who are going to stir up trouble because that's their game, or target dissidents or whatever, and that's probably, I would say, is more of a concern and more of a sort of live issue than trying to compare sort of random individuals who are mentally disturbed, who some of whom obviously get here, and not only here but Germany and other countries, from these war-torn areas, and occasionally kind of flip out and do something crazy, attack people. I don't think it's equivalent with the situation in Russia, where you've got an actual country intent on basically genociding.
Of course not. Of course not. It's I just highlight the individual criminality of both, because the Russian soldier who commits a war crime as part of what is essentially already a crime, meaning the uncalled for, unmerited invasion by Russia. They're two different things. But the war crimes committed by the Russians culturally are the same thing as the Muslim crimes currently. Muslim invaders, immigrants committed as part of the wave of those who fled, because we have to be very fair to people. There are many people who fled from a war in Syria, which Russia promoted, instigated, supported, fired up, and conducted. They created it. And millions of people fled, and nobody can blame them. And that they are Alawite, Christian, Muslim, whatever, doesn't matter. That's why they are welcomed in Europe at that point in time. The problem is that at the same time, amongst those are many people who exploit the situation. And if they then conduct crimes with a significantly higher statistical, with a rate so much higher than any other immigrants prior. Germany has had immigrants, economic immigrants, as well as from war zones. You remember the wars apart from the disintegration of Yugoslavia, sponsored by the Russians and conducted predominantly by the Serbs. But that war spawned a lot of refugees, amongst them many, many Muslim Bosniaks. Thereafter, many Kosovars. Yes, we are still dealing with organized crimes from the region and interaction in Germany, and we have a big issue with this. Still, we do not have massive knife attacks, waves of knife attacks, rapes, and the likes, and civil disobedience, and violence, and violent misconduct in Germany at that point in time from those refugees in the 1990s, because it's culturally a completely distinct setup, despite the fact that there are various religions involved. So it's not even something about Islam or anything, it's about where they come from. Russia created the crisis in Syria on purpose. That is what I'm trying to highlight. This is a long-term game, and we have to understand why they try to instill fear and panic, to put another wedge into the populations of Europe, because they knew, they understood, they forecast that European politicians would be pacifist, civil, reluctant to take action, would be feeble, meek, and the likes. They knew this, because it's easy to understand. And what you just discussed, even when you then try to mellow it down later, Peter, I'm not criticizing you and saying that you were mellowing it down by saying, oh, these are individual cases of people. No, it's not individual cases. There are hundreds and thousands of cases. It's not so individual anymore, even if every case is, of course, individual. Every case individually is a crime. But it's consistent with what has been created as a situation where people are literally coming out of a war zone and at the same time are culturally completely disconnected from the environment in which they have come as refugees. They are even averse to the environment into which they have come. That's the whole point I'm trying to make. And I think we should be looking into what it means for us, how we deal with it, given the fact that we know that the Russians created the setup for the Syrian civil war, that we know that they assisted part of the Taliban in order to create a bigger refugee pressure in Afghanistan in the years prior, which is why so many Afghan refugees went at the same time as the Syrians came through the same border pressure into Europe. We have to understand our enemy, meaning Russia, and what they do, and that the migration pressure, part of which they also engage in Africa by creating more and more upheaval, more and more pressure, is pushing into Europe. We have to understand that this is a global war. And if we fail to deter the individual crimes in our country, we lose popular consent to democracy in Europe. This is what Walter Bosbach, a very, very, very well-known, very calm German conservative politician who has been part of the Christian Democratic Union for many decades, said earlier, I think today on television, and it's the same thing which we've been saying here all the time. The disruption by Russia is that they try to capture the Europeans culturally and in their belief of democracy, like they invaded American campuses in the 1970s, late 60s, 70s, and 80s, to try to disintegrate the fabric of American society, to try to disintegrate families, to try to disintegrate people, disenchant them, utilize the obnoxious stain of Vietnam, then try to get their disenchantment with supposedly Nixon, Watergate, and whatnot, to try to get this through. We need to understand that our enemy is trying to make us self-doubt more than we should. Questioning yourself is one thing. Doubting yourself and your own culture is there brought by them to disintegrate the fabric of culture. And the fabric of good British culture is that there's a high degree of resilience. And when there's a real big problem, we'll go and get some tea.
Yes. Yeah, that's one way of looking at it. I think that where I just really agree with you is that this comes back to the criminal nature of the Kremlin, that they will exploit, and they have become masters at exploiting any sort of issue which will derive division. I mean, clearly they want to support Assad anyway because he's a murderous scumbag, and sort of murderous scumbags stick together. But fundamentally, they've got a spin-off reason for doing that. They actually want to see Europe swamped by a load of refugees. They don't give a toss about those refugees, those Syrians. They're quite happy to bomb the hell out of Aleppo and just kill them. And if millions of people flood Western Europe, they're just happy because it destabilizes Western Europe. It puts Western society under pressure, of course, because nobody has any interest in going to live in Russia. The Syrians aren't forming a beeline to go and live in Russia because Russia's a failed state, basically, and you can't thrive economically there, or you can't have a good life there. So naturally, they want to come to the West, which Russia presumably resents, and it's just about burning somebody else's house, which is the same sort of thing on Ukrainian territory. They're successful, so let's do a scorched earth policy because we can't stand having a neighbour looking successful, because that will likely be a threat to us, because sooner or later our citizens are going to work out that we're corrupt, stealing all their money, and deserve a better standard of living than we can offer them. And that's fundamentally what it's about, I think. And the fact that these regimes are willing to exploit issues like global energy prices and basically try to threaten and sort of hold the world hostage, and also global food supplies and refugees and immigration. It's just all part of a bigger picture. And again, this picture that we're getting back to, that organizations like the BBC should be picking up and should be linking together and should be explaining to the public, rather than just reporting on these things individually and not connecting them all together. And the fact that what's the common denominator here? The common denominator is a bunch of criminals in the Kremlin who are trying to manipulate the situation and cause problems for their own nefarious ends. And they won't call that out, and they won't explain that is what is going on here. And yeah, I think exactly what you say. That is part of the problem of the mainstream media, which is not really reporting on the reality of what's going on, and the picture that we have in front of us. And I do share your frustrations and your irritations on the fact that these issues aren't dealt with as they should be and reported accordingly. So, yep, I can agree with that. And yes, that's probably all I've got to say on it, because that's the way I see it, and I see it that way because of the repeated pattern of activity from the Kremlin on all sorts of these issues, and trying to undermine Western society, culture, civilization, politics, and trying to do that with every tool available at their disposal, including things like immigration, and exploiting people and populations and other countries to achieve their own basically nefarious, illegitimate political objectives. Yes, Axel.
Yeah, I think you put this rather well. I can only highly recommend to everyone who's listening, in case you haven't followed what we discussed here. We once had a review, because Thomas couldn't join at that time, of Thomas Reed's, German professor in the US, who wrote Active Measures, where he, after years of research, he's very much into also cybersecurity nowadays predominantly, and he's looking into the impact and use and abuse of artificial intelligence for the same purposes, of course. But he did a lot of comprehensive research, and specifically interviews and original sources, documentation, and interviews in Germany, the Czech Republic, and the likes for that. He reviewed the active measures as developed by the evil empire, meaning Soviet Russia / Russia, and the continuity and the long-term preparation, the long arc of communist socialist pretext, Oprichnina core, Russian intelligence services specifically, designed strategies to undermine, preferably shatter and disintegrate, the capabilities of the free nations of the West, led by the United States of America and its coalition of allies, West Germany during the Cold War and the likes, you name them, but the continuation thereof and thereafter. And he has gone through this. I can only highlight that if you ever want to spend a bit of money, I don't know what the book is going to cost, probably $15, $20 at the moment. Who knows? I'm not selling this book. But if you have access to it, read it. Read it again. Listen to it if need be. There's an audiobook. Very well read, by the way. I can only highlight this is absolutely vital for people to understand. They may have to get used to a number of things which they didn't quite like or didn't quite understand or didn't quite see in the past. So what? The data which is behind that is extremely comprehensive. The data which we couldn't, or he couldn't, and everybody associated with such review and analysis could not attain, because the Russians and the Stasi destroyed it and hid it, will be many times bigger. We know a lot about this. Our friends in Virginia, hello, know a lot about this. The public fails to acknowledge it. We cannot allow our colleagues in the electorates of the Western coalition to behave like an idiocracy.
Have you seen that movie?
Of course I saw the movie.
Idiocracy?
I read the script before it was filmed.
I cannot imagine you watching the movie Idiocracy.
How can you not? It's a cultural critique. It's a nihilistic critique.
It is one of the, when I first saw it, it was one of the dumbest things that I could ever imagine, but it's so, it's like prophetic in some ways, right? It's, but I do like Brando. What can I say? I encourage people to watch this dumb movie, because it is absolutely absurd, but you see so much of where you see our world going, and it is extremely disturbing, and if you think about it, right?
Because people are so having idiocracy actually takes Big Brother to a personal level. It takes the rather left of center critique of consumerism one step further, whilst at the same time completely failing to understand that most of the stuff is very, very classic. Aldous Huxley and George Orwell, which is an anti-Stalinist, anti-communist treatise, that fascism and Bolshevism are the same. People haven't yet grasped at that time. But actually, the cultural critique in it, in Idiocracy, is deep, it's harsh, but it's also whittled down and also made very plastic so that an American audience could easily refer to it. That's fine. This is, I think, why you believe that I would have difficulties. You are watching it, but it's not true. I think that, of course, the cultural critique you would find in Fargo is significantly more sublime and harsher. But it's equally true. And it's very simplistic. And it's more oriented on the core nucleus of family relations and individuals. And it takes like 7, if you go for movies. It takes like 7, the review of what, and the spectacular review of the so-called vices of the individual and the 7 deadly sins one step further by transporting it back into what is current society. So Fargo in that regard, but then again, if you look at who made it, then you know why, is significantly more projective into the future than Idiocracy is from my point of view. But Idiocracy clearly defines as to what the limitations of a media indoctrinated electorate are since the days of Bill Clinton. That's the first big media campaign on television which actually worked. If you think about you have to go back to the days of evil Mr. Stephanopoulos and genius Mr. Carville to appraise that appropriately. But it is the early 1990s where, your way of dealing with TV actually had such an impact.
Yes, but it is, when the first time I watched it, it was just because the person I was with at the time, she had 3 boys and 3 teenage boys. It's a perfect movie for 3 teenage boys. They absolutely loved it. The more you thought about it, it just like, and tried to get that through to the boys was a lot of fun and very interesting. It's like, can you guys see the life lessons rather than being all excited about Brondo? It's got electrolytes.
Yeah, and it kills all the plants.
Yes, it does. And you can be a genius just by suggesting you put water like from the toilet on the plants, and you can end up being president. Boy, doesn't that just ring these days sometimes, right?
No, it instills a deathly joy.
Yes, absolutely. So
I'm not impressed by your recent past and current campaigns.
Host connection issues. If the host phone is listening in, we may need to take action to avoid a crash. Please.
All righty, that may get saved, hopefully. And there's a couple of things that people may do, but what I will say is if we do crash, please come right back, because coming right back means we get our listeners back, and that's a good thing. So anyway, I okay, I think we're saved. I have to say I've been listening and just letting you guys have your conversation, but there's one thing that came to my mind, Peter, when you were talking about the airspace and the airports being closed and how restoring that can be good. But what it made me think of actually was an article that I read last night or this morning, regarding the evacuation of severely injured people and children of